We're going to start in about 12 seconds. If you would silence your phones, please, including the mayor. Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, December 4th, 2023. This is a workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. We're live in the City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor of City Hall. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2:03 in the morning. No, it's not. 9:03 a.m. in the morning. And would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And with that, we'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Don Preston, absent. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stronowski.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Here.
Mayor Stan Mills. We have 6. We have a quorum and are able to formally conduct business today. Thank you all for being here. With that, I'd also like to identify the staff it takes to run our meetings. And from my left to right, we've got City Secretary Ann Womack. We've got Assistant City Manager, also as Interim City Manager, Evan Miller. We've got City Solicitor Alex Burns. Lynn Cohen as the Communications Specialist. Kevin Williams, Director of Public Works. And Matt Janis, Building and Licensing. And I need a helpful name here. Scott. He's with Building and Licensing. Thank you. Sorry about that. Anybody else we're missing? We've got some people from the parking department, and they'll introduce themselves as appropriate. With that, I want to thank everybody for those of you that are here in person. And as usual, we seek feedback from you. And at certain times during the meeting, we'll call on you to stand up and give your name and relationship to the city and give us some input on the topics that we have before us. Also, I want to thank everybody that's watching virtually. Appreciate it. And reminder that support documents, they are documents that support our agenda items when they are ready in advance of a meeting, are inserted or embedded into the agenda. If you go to the website and seek the agenda, you will be able to see the same documents that we have up here in advance of the meeting, no less. With that, I do want to let you know that exercising the mayor's prerogative is going to change the sequencing of 2 items. After the Rossi Group, which is new business A, after that, I'd like to then do new business H, which is the VIA, so that they can skedaddle afterwards and early in the meeting and not have to wait till the end of the meeting. With that, I think we are ready to go to the correspondence. And the correspondence, when it's received a sufficient time ahead of the meeting, is also embedded in the agenda. So we don't go over the correspondence. Instead, we ask you to take a look at it online, embedded in the agenda. With that, we'll then move to the city manager's report. Alex?
Evan.
City manager report. Evan.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm having a struggle this morning. Somebody keep an eye on me.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, and members of the public. The Rehoboth Beach Volunteer Fire Company's Hometown Christmas Parade will make its way along Rehoboth Avenue this evening, beginning at 6 p.m. Several road closures will be in place. Rehoboth Avenue will be closed from the traffic circle to the bandstand from 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. State Street from Hickman Street to Rehoboth Avenue and Country Club Drive will be closed from 4 to 10 p.m. Sussex Street from Columbia Avenue to 4th Street will be closed from 4 to 9 p.m. and 5th Street from Rehoboth Avenue to Kent Street will be closed from 4 to 9 p.m. City Hall will be closed from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow so that all employees may attend the annual holiday luncheon. If citizens have business to conduct at City Hall tomorrow, we request that they please plan accordingly. Again, that is 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow. Work to replace the water main in the 3rd block of Laurel Street and to repave that block as well as Scarborough Avenue from Hickman to Christian Streets have been completed. A final inspection is scheduled for tomorrow. The outfall project on Scarborough Avenue Extended also has been completed with a final inspection scheduled for this week as well. Sposato and Envirotech are coordinating on follow-up work, and new plantings are expected to be installed in the spring. A quick update on the Beach Patrol project. Work will begin this week on installation of the fencing for the project site and laydown area. The surrounding properties have been notified and invited to a meet with the contractor today. An update on the restrooms. The Delaware Avenue restroom is closed for the season, but the Rehoboth Avenue and Grove Park restrooms remain open. An update on the grant request applications. As commissioners know, the deadline for grant request applications for fiscal year 25 were due December 1st, and we have received grant applications from Main Street, the Historical Society and Museum, the Public Library, and the Fire Company. That's all I have to report, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions of the city man?
I do. I just have a couple of curiosities. First, I wanted to give a shout out on the outfall project on Scarborough Extended, on how seamlessly that went. It was absolutely terrific that I did not get one phone call from anyone on my street complaining about anything. They were all in awe of exactly what type of infrastructure is actually at the end where we adjoin Silver Lake. So that phase of the project went extremely well, and for everyone involved in that was eye-opening as well as very nicely done. And the other two things I just wanted to ask, and maybe I've missed it, but there are two items that I mentioned back in November, and on November 17th, and maybe nothing has happened since then, but I have yet to see any email or notification about the status of the vacancy that I understand just through the grapevine has been filled at the Historical Society, as well as any information about the diorama situation. So, City Manager Interim, I don't know if you know anything or if it's just an ongoing curiosity for me.
Sure. I personally have not received any correspondence from the Historical Society about the vacancy.
Okay.
In terms of the diorama, I was contacted by Paul Lovett several weeks ago, just requesting a meeting with me to talk about the possibility of having the diorama set up in the atrium here at City Hall. I did plan to meet with him, and then about 10 minutes before, I was consumed with many different things, so I asked Margaret Carson to fill in my place. And in that meeting, they had kind of went over the logistics of where the diorama could possibly go. And so after some discussion, I think internally there were still some unanswered questions. I think we would have to largely work out, again, where the diorama is going to go. How do we plan to provide access for the public around the diorama, if it's just on one side or around the entire diorama, establishing maybe days and times where Paul could give his talk about the diorama and plan, because right now what he does is he schedules appointments with individuals who want to come see it. So whether there is certain days and times we want to limit those types of interactions just because we use the atrium for things like interviews, for the news, and other reasons as well. So just a couple questions that I think are outstanding with the diorama, but certainly I'm not opposed to the diorama. Whatever the desire is of the commissioners, I'm more than happy to work with Mr. Lovett on that.
Well, great. I'm very glad to hear that there's something going on with that particular issue, and I hope we don't make it more complicated than it needs to be and get on with it ASAP. So that's just a commentary from me. Thank you very much for that.
Anything else from city manager?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Walter, depending on what your topic is, we're not talking about the dining. What?
123 Hennepin Avenue. While you all may or may not know what's happening, and early on I saw the specifics in a letter from what appeared to be the successful bidder for the lifeguard facility, I haven't seen any place of the places that I look for information from the city about the letter from the successful contractor about laydown areas or the impact to Baltimore Avenue or the use of the parking lot or anything else. And since it is a closed committee that is dealing with it, that is an administration, that there is no other committee and no citizen committee, maybe a little bit more briefing from the city manager about what to expect and what was approved out of that letter, and or anything else the public might have a right to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. With that, we'll go to the city solicitor's report. Now, Alex.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have two quick items. The first is 330 Hospitality Group, LLC versus City of Rehoboth. I wanted to provide the citation for that case. It is in the Superior Court of Delaware, a civil action. It's number S22C-11-016 space RHR. And the reason I'm giving that citation is because the court maintains a database of all the filings. They're public documents. If anyone wants to learn about that case, you're very welcome to go do that. Since this body last met, the plaintiff, 330, filed a reply brief to the city's position that the city believes this case should be dismissed because the decision of this body was supported by the record, properly articulated, and code-based. I recall this is a denial of a rezoning request. The other item I have is a new case. This is a quiet title action related to the railroad properties. Recall earlier this year, there was some discussion about a lease that expired related to the lots C and D surf house lots. They collectively comprise about 12,500 square feet of land. And for all we can tell, the city owns those lots. We did a title search and there's no deed. No one has a deed to it, but going back and looking through the records, it appears the city owns it. So this is a quiet title action. Essentially, the city's asking the Court of Chancery to issue an order stating that the city owns those lots. It's very simple. It's not inherently adversarial. There's no other party mentioned in the caption of the case. It is just relating to the city. And so in that action, the city will be required to post in the newspaper information about the court case. Anyone who objects will have the opportunity to go to the Court of Chancery and say they own that property. But the case for that is 2023-1083-BWD. And Magistrate David has scheduled a hearing on February 22nd, 2024. And there'll be more information to come on that one, but that is a new case. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex. With that, there is no old business identified. We're going to go on to new business.
Mayor, before you go,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Alex, could you just remind me on 330 Rehoboth?
Sure.
What you think the timeline is for maybe next step?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Approximately, Dan Griffith is the attorney for the city who is leading the charge on that case, and he anticipates approximately Q2 of 2024, the court will issue a decision. At this point, the court may require oral argument, or the court has the option of just deciding the case, as they would say, on the papers without additional information. So approximately Q2 2024.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. With that, no old business is identified. We'll move on to new business. Receive preliminary recommendations from Rossi Group on parking and transportation as they relate to an ongoing parking and transportation study. Evan?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I would like to introduce Alexis Morris with Rossi Group. Lex is the Director of Environmental Services. Lex also assisted the city with the Streetscape, Baltimore-Wilmington Avenue Streetscape Task Force. So she provided a lot of assistance to that group. With Lex is Anne-Marie Townsend. She may be familiar to some of you. She's currently a senior project manager with Rossi Group, but she was formerly the city manager for the city of Lewis. So with that, I will turn it over to Lex.
Sure, thank you so much, Evan. So I've got this
And
projecting here. How do we?
you put the lectern PC up?
Alexis, make sure you speak close to that microphone.
Absolutely.
Bunky, you want to raise the platform at all? There's a magic button. Do you know where it is on the, Kevin will do it. Show Bunky how to do that.
There we go.
Hey, I'm ready.
Guess that's enough. Thanks, Kevin. All right, is that better?
That's better,
Okay,
yes.
Fantastic. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to present here today. Rossi Group has been working on a traffic and parking study since May of 2023 with the city. This is presenting initial findings. The study will conclude itself in March, April timeframe. So we've got roughly a year to proceed all the way through to completion. As Evan was kind enough to mention, so my name is Alexis Morris. I'm with Rossi Group, Director of Environmental Services. I've got roughly 20 years experience working in the field of environmental and transportation planning. And here with me today, we are very happy to have Anne-Marie Townsend, who recently joined Rossi Group and brings her wealth of knowledge about Delaware and Delaware municipal and county estate planning. So thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Just a quick overview of our presentation here today. We want to talk about our study goals, all of our efforts to date, a stakeholder survey. Hopefully some of you participated in that. It was available from October 24th through November 27th. And then our immediate focus areas. So these are issues and short-term recommendations. The hope here today by presenting these are kind of the quick hit items, some of which can even be potentially, if embraced, implemented before the next peak season here in Rehoboth to hopefully offer some improvements. And then, of course, next steps. So from our scope of work, we are identifying realistic goals and actions to improve traffic and parking within Rehoboth Beach. Those actions are going to be categorized as short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Again, today our recommendations are really going to focus on those short-term improvements that hopefully can be implemented in the very near future. And effort to date. So previously, the city conducted a parking capacity study, inventorying existing parking spaces throughout the city. There was also a wayfinding study that was initiated and the 2020 CDP, which identified clear traffic and transportation goals. Out of that study comes our study here today with the traffic and parking focus. What Rossi has done since May is really to review the transportation and parking plans, studies, and policies that have been conducted to date, as well as guidance. So that includes parking studies conducted within the city, dating as far back as the mid-'80s, as well as any guidance from the state, as well as best professional knowledge and things like that. We also cataloged alternative modes of transportation, including pedestrian, bike, and transit facilities throughout the city, and detailed key roadway conditions through field visits and a look at annual daily traffic volumes sourced from DelDOT. So throughout the city right now, we have a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. Obviously, Rehoboth Avenue is the most congested thoroughfare. While the DelDOT ADT numbers don't necessarily reflect the fluctuation in traffic throughout the seasons, looking at DelDOT's loop data for the Delaware 1 and Rehoboth intersection, we can really get an idea of what's going on there. So basically through your winter months, you've got roughly half the volumes that we're seeing for the peak season being from May through August. The other thing to note is that the gradual increase over the spring is fairly steady as we increase from your winter months up until your spring or summer peak. The drop-off at the end of your peak season's pretty significant in just that it drops off and you enter winter mode or hibernation mode, so to speak. Another thing that has been conducted, we were out doing field studies in June, July, and August. This included 130 hours almost of observations focused on key roadways and intersections, as well as Canal Street and Christian Street. Our staff was out looking at bike and ped movements. We were looking at transit facilities. So we also, while we were out doing our field studies, we were looking at parking along Rehoboth Avenue, parking along First Street, parking within the city's municipal lot here, as well as the park and ride lot, to get an idea of what the utilization was, what some of those challenges were. We also looked at multiple intersections throughout the city. We've also been in the process of conducting stakeholder interviews. So those stakeholder interviews have involved EMS services, HOAs, Main Street Rehoboth, DART, and Jolly Trolley. Those interviews are continuing and ongoing and will continue through roughly mid-December. We really wanted to time those in such a way that with DART and Jolly Trolley in particular, hopefully they've got an opportunity to synthesize some of those numbers at the end of your vacation season. As I mentioned, our stakeholder survey was posted and made available in October 24th through November 27. It was posted via Reach Out Rehoboth, shared on the Coast TV, promoted by Lines in the Sand, email blast, and marquee messaging, and the press release. So thank you very much, Lynn, for your help in getting the survey out there and getting some pretty reasonable participation. We had 665 participants, including 333 business owners, property owners, and residents. So through Reach Out Rehoboth, we do encourage folks to log in, register through Reach Out Rehoboth, and part of that process is identifying yourself as either a property owner, a business owner, a resident, or other, so that there's a couple different categories that folks can fall under. But out of those, we've got 333 residents, business owners, and property owners. And the nice thing about having that data set is when we go through and we start looking at the survey results, we can really see, is there a difference between what maybe visitors are saying versus the property owners. Surprisingly, there wasn't that significant of a difference. So question number one really acknowledged the fact that there is limited space in downtown Rehoboth. We've got a very developed commercial core with limited opportunities for enhancing or increasing space. What we wanted to do was really understand where best our participants or survey participants would like to devote and prioritize improvements for transportation. So transportation's not just your cars, right? But it's your transit, it's bikes and peds, it's moving people. And there's lots of different ways to move people. One of the highest priorities is your pedestrian accessible areas, followed very shortly by vehicular parking in the downtown core area. And then delivery and drop-off pickup parking was not quite as high a priority, followed also by bike, scooter, and other mobility accommodations. But I think what we heard resoundingly was that those ped accessible areas is the priority. And then another question that we asked was, what's contributing most to your parking challenges in Rehoboth? So the lack of turnover at existing parking spaces was something that we heard not only in response to this question number two, but we also heard it in some of our open-ended responses. Things like people shouldn't be able to park all day in the downtown core. The other priority or contributor rather is the insufficient alternatives to parking in the downtown core. So what else can we do? How else can we get to the downtown core and make use of that space without requiring parking? We also asked, what do you think contributes the most to traffic congestion in Rehoboth Beach? The total number of motor vehicles or the volume of cars. By far and above, the biggest contributor. Also, what we heard in some of our open-ended responses is too many people, that kind of notion, which isn't surprising, but at the same point in time, I think that, acknowledging that the cars are a challenge, how do we maybe get people out of the cars? Insufficient infrastructure and capacity for motorized vehicles. So again, that's really speaking to your volume of cars, followed by insufficient alternative transportation options and delivery vehicles. So early on, and even when we were conducting our streetscape study, we heard a lot of concerns about the delivery vehicles and the timing of delivery vehicles interfering with transportation in and around the downtown core, particularly on Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue. Based on the results of this study, it's not seen as that much of an issue. That certainly doesn't mean that it's not an issue. So now we are getting into some of our more open-ended responses. If you believe that are additional contributing factors to parking and traffic congestion in Rehoboth Beach, please list them here. Among the 291 participants, so these are folks who responded to those open-ended questions, and I think that that's kind of your norm, right? People click through a survey, the open-ended questions, maybe they don't take the time to provide a response. But out of the responses that we received, 99 folks commented that there's insufficient parking in the downtown core, including 69 comments citing a need for that parking garage. So the parking garage was initially studied, again, talking to some of those prior studies that we were looking at back in the 80s. There's been a couple different reasons that it hasn't really followed through, but obviously people here in downtown Rehoboth are still seeing that as a concern or an issue. The other comment, again, I kind of touched on this, but overdevelopment, too populated, and the lack of public transportation options. There's a number of different other comments that we received, and we can go into a little more detail there, but this is just kind of meant to be an overview here today. So asking folks to prioritize their support for potential parking solutions. Obviously, the priority is that additional parking in downtown Rehoboth, whether that's a parking garage or how exactly that's being provided, there is a need for downtown parking. And we've got another question that kind of feeds into that a little bit. I think it's going to shed some more light. Enhanced shuttle and transit options from off-site parking, and then better signage or promotion of metered parking areas, striped parking spaces and permit spaces where maybe they aren't currently marked, and then expanding the metered parking areas into existing permit areas beyond the commercial core was kind of lower priority, which is fairly consistent with, I think, what our expectations were. Question number 6, prioritize your support for the following potential transportation solutions. Highest priority was enhanced shuttle transit options, followed by enhanced crosswalk safety measures, including signage, raised crosswalks, flashing beacons, things like that. And the nice thing about those types of solutions is that they're fairly cost-effective, easy to implement. And then enhanced destination wayfinding, signage noting permit and metered areas. So kind of just enhancing that, where can people park, and maybe campaign to advertise that better. Followed by shared lane bike markings and signage, and then enhanced traffic calming measures. Another one of our open-ended questions, what additional potential parking and transportation solutions would you suggest? More parking, again, 113 responses, with 90 requesting a parking garage, more public transportation, and then improved bike and ped facilities. And then how many blocks would you be willing to walk from parking to your destination? So based on our survey results, we've got just over 80% of responses indicating that they're willing to walk 3 blocks or more to reach their destination, which I think that's important to know. So obviously, people want to get to the beach. Obviously, they want to be within that first 1 or 2 blocks of Rehoboth Avenue. But maybe it's okay to start looking at a parking garage that isn't right there, because that's also your premium real estate. That's going to be where it's most expensive to implement. So if we can look at something that's within 3 to 4 blocks of those primary core areas, at least 82% or almost 83% of people, based on our survey results now, whether or not they do it in real life is always a question, but theoretically they would be willing to walk that far. And then asking folks what would make you more comfortable or encourage you to walk in downtown Rehoboth Beach. 434 folks responded here, many of which said they already walk. There's no improvements needed. But 60 of our responses indicated that wider, safer sidewalks and crosswalks are important, and 35 responses noted motorist enforcement and education. So this kind of aligns up with some of what we saw when we were conducting our field studies. A lot of motorists not yielding to people in the crosswalks, understanding that those peds are vulnerable users, and motorists really do need to make sure that they're providing a way for them. And then what would make you more comfortable or encourage you to bike in Rehoboth Beach? So we had 460 participants responding to this question. 54 responses said do nothing. But the interesting thing is that do nothing means there's nothing you can do, I'm not going to bike, or do nothing because I already bike. So that is kind of a divided response. It's a little bit of a nuance there to people's responses. Providing or getting fewer cars in downtown Rehoboth is also important. So how do we get people out of their cars? How do we make there be fewer cars so that more people are willing to bike? And then more bike lanes. So 32 responses requesting those. And then kind of similarly, what would motivate you to park at a public transit stop or off-site parking lot and use a shuttle to get to your downtown destination? Low cost or free service, 90 responses. Frequent stops, 77, and nothing, 75. That's going to lead us to some immediate focus areas. So we've identified these immediate focus areas based on our field visits again, based on discussions with city staff, best practice research, and the stakeholder interviews and survey. These immediate focus area recommendations, again, are intended to be short-term, often with potential implementation even prior to the 2024 summer season. Our larger study that we're still in the process of developing, that's going to have some more longer-term recommendations, but these are really those immediate, short, quick hit items. So again, noting that there's insufficient bike and ped facilities resulting in increased conflicts and safety issues. Drivers not yielding to pedestrians and crosswalks. How can we enforce that? Make people a little more aware of that. Insufficient parking near points of interest, parking and transportation challenges that are extending even beyond the summer season. So when we did look at the traffic numbers and seeing that eastbound Rehoboth Avenue coming into Rehoboth traffic volumes, recognizing that those volumes are picking up earlier and earlier in the season, not necessarily just in May. And then evolving standards for parking space and space sizes and ADA parking. Another area of focus is insufficient alternatives to personal motorized vehicles. Some of our walk your bike pavement markings currently don't address other alternative modes. Some of them are worn. And then one thing that we observed when we were out in the field is a lot of these 30-minute parking space signs, they're difficult to see. So you don't really see that it's 30-minute parking only until you've already pulled into the space. The challenge with that, of course, is now you've got to back out of it, contributing to additional congestion downtown. Conflicts between delivery trucks and other roadway users, and some sightline concerns. So deriving from our immediate focus areas, we are recommending some further analysis and potentially implementation of a bike ped pilot demonstration project. We looked at the King Charles Street corridor. I think there's a lot of opportunities along there. So right now we looked at speed data. Speed data isn't really indicating that speed is a problem out here, but obviously volumes are. So what are some things that we can do? There's some pretty broad right-of-way between the right-of-way and the parking. How can we make it safer for peds to cross King Charles Street? And there's a process by where we've got these demonstration projects. Maybe we can implement some of the crosswalk improvements, some of the bike ped facilities in a way that they're temporary, low cost, and we can see those and the effects of them as soon as the summer, and then based on the feedback, moving forward, make it a more permanent solution. Signal timing modifications. So when we looked at the intersections of 1st and 2nd Street along Rehoboth Avenue, we see that they are currently not operating at capacity. We can go in and we can work with the city to optimize those signal timings. Something else that might be worth considering when we do that is LPIs, or lead pedestrian intervals, at least during your peak periods. That's going to give essentially your pedestrians a head start. Not only does that make it safer for them to cross the roads, but it also brings to the forefront to drivers, hey, listen, maybe the peds are a precedent here. And then yield to pedestrian signs at signalized intersections. Again, this is pretty easy to implement. It's just a state law, yield to pedestrian signs. This is already a standard signage. It's just a matter of installing it within the city at the signalized intersections. And then parking program modifications. This involves going into the Park Mobile data a little bit more, understanding perhaps what Park Mobile offers, also maybe understanding what other programs are out there. Does it make sense to extend our parking season to include May 1st through October 31st? So that hits some of the big festivals that are in the area. Also understanding, is it possible and does it make sense to implement demand-based meter rates? So whether that just means parking rates increase during some of those more volume-specific timeframes, or should we even look at like different rates for different areas? So within the first and second blocks, maybe we're looking at a higher rate than the third and fourth. Again, this is just kind of understanding what is available out there with the existing systems and whether or not it should be extended. And then the other thing that we wanted to do was review the number of free parking permits allowed per each address. So I've got some more specific data numbers. I'm not going to get into them right now, but if you want to, we can pull those up and kind of take a look. But then exploring additional capabilities within Parking Mobile to display loading zones or accessible parking and 30-minute parking. So if something were available, instead of having to drive around town and look for it, maybe through the Parking Mobile app, you can get an idea of where those spaces are. And then instead of making loops up and down Rehoboth Avenue multiple times, hopefully we can get you right there. And then again, continuing to explore those parking garage options for the downtown core. Like I said, obviously, we heard a lot of interest. That effort hasn't proceeded forward multiple times in the past for a variety of different reasons, but maybe now is the time. The other element for our parking program modifications is to better understand utilization at Martin's Lawn parking lot and Deauville Beach parking lot, and then looking at what it would take to upgrade the EV charging station from level 2 to level 3 facilities. It's my understanding right now that level 3 facilities are significantly more expensive, but they are also far more utilized. And then parking space updates. So this is really more in line with the whole recommending that the city implement a policy to adopt the latest DELDOT and ADA parking space recommendations and always defer to that latest guidance. So we're not really suggesting a specific size, but rather to say, hey, the city will always defer to that latest guidance. And then the policy needs to ensure that in a new capital planning or improvement project implements those updates. So any resurfacing project, driveway modifications, things like that. So this kind of comes out of when we were doing our streetscape study. We did notice a number of spaces, particularly on First Street, where the spaces are significantly less than what standard practice would permit. And then something else to consider right now is the idea of a private downtown shuttle. So this would be a transit solution, but maybe engaging those local businesses and the Chamber of Commerce to investigate options for a privately operated shuttle or service, and engaging the hotels along Route 1. So maybe it provides employee parking, but also gets folks from Route 1 into downtown Rehoboth with multiple stops along the way. Again, providing a solution to get people out of the cars. Hopefully, if you're just coming into Rehoboth for the day, maybe this is a viable solution to get you out of your vehicle. One of our other immediate focus areas is walk your bike pavement markings. So instead of the existing walk your bike marking, we're talking about upgrading these to pedestrian zone walk your wheels. So this is a little more consistent with what's on Delaware's campus right now. Let's go ahead and continue to install them, but let's do something that's a little bit more of a permanent and modify it to make sure that it's very clearly indicating, one, this is a pedestrian zone, the sidewalk is a pedestrian zone, so make sure that you're walking your wheels, whatever your wheels may be. And then we are also looking at 30-minute parking spaces, so maybe just add descriptive pavement markings so it's a little bit clearer as you pull up to the space before you pull into the space. This is a 30-minute parking zone. The same idea could probably be implemented also for a delivery zone or something else to that effect. And then let's evaluate the feasibility of time delivery. So some of our initial investigation indicated that there is a cost benefit to the businesses for streamlining delivery times. I know that that's been brought up here in Rehoboth in the past, but our thought is let's go ahead and engage the businesses, engage the chamber to evaluate and any opportunity to streamline those delivery times. In implementing a time and size restriction policy, at least along Rehoboth, Baltimore, and Wilmington Avenues. Again, it's more of an investigative type option, but certainly something that could be began immediately. And then, of course, continued maintenance of sightlines. We recognize that, there's a lot of work that's being done consistently, in particular throughout the growing season, but making sure that we are enforcing the code to monitor and address private property, any vegetation that might be interfering with traffic signs, and intersections. So this table is really just an overview of all of the issues that we've identified. Again, these are immediate issues, short hit type issues. These are not inclusive of all of the transportation and parking issues in Rehoboth, but some of those first initial issues and some early recommendations that might be able to be implemented in the very near future. So our next steps include further refinement of these recommendations along with others. In February 2024, we're going to come back with final recommendations for city staff with the intent of preparing a draft document of final recommendations with goals and action items for March. And that will be presented to commissioners in March of 2024, and then finalizing our report in April of 2024. And I guess any questions?
Thank you, Alexis. It looks like based on your timetable for next steps is that most likely no recommendations would be implemented before next summer until mid-2025. I'm looking at budgeting, funding and things like that. So just looking at the time frame. I think this is probably, I've been here 26 years, I think it's probably one of the most challenging things that Rehoboth's ever had to look to resolve. So, I find the studies interesting. Even mention of the desire for additional alternative transportation options. I'm convinced that if we put 3 more ride-on stations somewhere outside the city, that we're not going to do any better to get people to ride them unless we come up with some magic formula. And I thought it was interesting, I'm just picking a few things here, interesting that people are willing, 80% are willing to walk 3 or more blocks, but they say there's insufficient parking near points of interest, So I look forward to the next set of recommendations, but especially what the rationale is for choosing those paths forward. Anybody else?
I have several things, but I don't want to monopolize. So, gentlemen,
I have a couple as
go ahead.
well. The first two I had is, did you look at speed limits within the city?
Yeah, throughout the city, speed limits are set at 25 miles per hour.
Right, and because one of the issues, or one of the committees have come forward with the discussion that perhaps we should lower that, and I just had a constituent even this week, or last week, mentioned to me that on a number of streets where we have straightaways like Henlopen or Columbia, people are going way beyond 25.
Beyond 25.
I understand it's an enforcement issue, but it's just something I think we should consider. The other question is, the parking garage comes up quite a bit. And I think as a follow-up, if that's a recommendation, is I think we need to ask people what they expect they're going to pay. It's not going to be $2. And, to have a parking garage empty 8 months out of the year, to build a multi-million-dollar parking garage, I think is a nice, idea. But in terms of its utilization and cost, I think people need to be aware that you can park on the street for $2 or $3, but you're going to park in a parking garage for 15. So,
Well, that's actually something interesting that came out of our survey, and certainly not to cut you off at all, but it wasn't 90% of our responses, but one of the comments that we heard fairly significantly is that parking in downtown Rehoboth is too cheap. So the question then becomes, yes, too inexpensive. The question then becomes, the idea of the on-demand parking, do you increase those rates, particularly during your peak season? And maybe that makes parking in a garage more desirable, and also potentially more profitable. So if parking downtown right in that first or second block of Rehoboth Avenue becomes significantly more expensive, does it then make more sense? Or even there's a time limit on it. A 3 or a 4 hour time limit as opposed to you can park there all day. Well, maybe if I want to go to the beach, I do utilize the parking garage. Just things to consider.
Thank you.
Tony, go ahead.
I need some assistance, especially with signage, and I have several other things to just check in about. 8 a.m. this morning, I am coming down State Road, which everyone I suspect in this room knows exactly where I am. And there are signs in the middle of the 2 lanes that say stop for pedestrians, I believe is exactly what's on there. The car in front of me, there are no other cars on State Road, myself and one other. And in front of me, 2 people standing on the corner. One of them had already made it across. And the car in front of me just completely kept on going. As I stopped and was like, what is this? So I'm not understanding, and maybe you can help me make the leap here. I don't understand. It appears to me, just anecdotally, people do not read the signs, nor do they care what the signs say today. So help me with how additional signage or different signage can help the practices that so many people just believe or act as if the rules do not apply to them.
Yeah. So the one sign that we did recommend, it's state law to yield to pedestrians. One of the conversations or comments that we heard from the police chief, from Evan and Kevin, is that the police, parking enforcement officers, folks out enforcing what people are doing, when people say, I didn't know that was the thing, they like to have the sign or have something that they can point to and immediately say, no, it says it right there. You have zero excuse. So again, providing additional signage, in this case, it's indicating that it is state law to stop for pedestrians.
Well, and then so
Helps to that enforcement component. Obviously, enforcement's also
Yes.
a huge piece.
Well, that's where I was going,
Yeah.
that if you don't have the enforcement to back up what the sign says, the sign to me is just optional.
No, absolutely.
Because that's the way people seem to believe signs are there for them to opine on whether or not that applies to me. Okay, that's helpful from the enforcement standpoint. I'm also wondering, I probably should know this, but I do not, who is responsible for the timing of the signals on Rehoboth Avenue? Who makes those decisions? Is that, I've never heard the city being responsible
We
for.
looked into it because that was the question.
Please.
It is Rehoboth, Rehoboth Avenue is a state route, so is that handled within the city or is that at the state level? And it is handled within the city. So
Within
we
the
need to
city,
get
so we can change those
We
things.
do have the ability to change
Okay.
those, and we're happy to work with you to get those changed. And when we talk about implementing some of these recommendations in the short term, that's a pretty easy one to implement. The cost to do so is probably something that, could easily be done within the existing budget even.
Well, and the last one that I have is, I'm not satisfied to wait until 2025 to do what I consider, and I could be in the minority, simple things. We have talked about the 30-minute meters for the last 8 years that I've sat up here. So I'm not understanding why we can't act at a minimum. What if we just decided we're going to do one thing that's productive, and we would know. I mean, we talk around the 30-minute meters, but obviously the core issue is the same issue, just like delivery trucks. It's the same issue we were talking about in 2013. So I'm not certain that there aren't some things in here that we have talked to death, and we need to do some attempts, is just the way I see it.
I think that's very reasonable.
Okay.
You could prioritize the recommendations of what could be, have immediacy to them, and others that need much more extensive discussion, the parking garage and things like that.
Well, my final word, I believe very strongly our parking rates are too low, period. They don't do anything to assist in the issues, the core issues that we need to solve. So to me, we have a huge opportunity before the '24 season to really take a hard look and make some what we might think are hard decisions, but possibly needed decisions on the parking rates.
Well, I'd like us to be mindful that at the end of a year report, June gave to us a mega list of challenges there. And there are so many that Evan and I are contemplating a special meeting or two, just delving into parking, because there were 20 or 30 challenges there that I think needed to be addressed with some expediency. So that could be part of that. Just FYI, a reminder that later on in this meeting, one of our topics is going to be talking about coordination of dates and on different codes. And one of them, if you recall, has to do with coordinating with the parking season. And if you recall in here, one of the recommendations is to extend the parking season. So I don't know if we're ready for that now, but maybe it's part of that conversation we have later this morning.
Mayor, I have a couple questions, if I may.
Yes.
Just for some clarifications, thanks for the information here. On the survey, 665 participants, are you able in future or at all to parse out the responses between the residents, the business owners, and the property owners so that we know who's responding to what question in those regards?
So we do have that data.
Okay.
One of the questions was, if we present the data in that way, does it kind of like put a spin of us versus them on the data? Interestingly, what we found was that there really isn't that much of a difference.
Okay.
Whether it's property owners, business owners, and residents versus others. So I think there's one question, and I can pull through it really fairly quickly. Okay, so question number 1, competing demands. So this was the only one where there was like a noticeable difference between the responses, and that difference was really only that there was an increased gap between pet accessible areas versus the downtown parking, with pet accessible areas taking far greater precedent. And so what you're seeing right now in this slide is they're really pretty close together, but if you just focus on those property owners and business owners, that spread gets a little bit wider.
I guess, and not to get too deep into the weeds that I'm accused of many times, but on question 2, that what it really interested me was that lack of turnover in existing parking, whether that was reflective of one of those three categories, if there was a greater response to business, to visitors, property owners. Question 2.
Okay. So right now, the numbers that I have in front of me is based specifically on residents, property owners, and business owners, and we've kind of got them lumped together. I can take a look at the data and see if it's possible to pull out business owners and specifically.
Specific for that, addressing
Yeah.
that issue.
Okay.
Just curious.
Yeah, we can definitely
Then
do that.
how did you define, in question number 1, you talked about vehicular parking in the downtown core area. How do you define the downtown core area?
Downtown core is really that downtown commercial area, so Rehoboth Avenue, Baltimore Avenue, and Wilmington Avenues within the first couple of blocks.
Right, so that is the distinct, throughout the survey to use
Yeah,
in your
yeah.
Okay. And then also, how do you define the season? You speak about season uses. Is there a specific date parameter that you've attached to that?
Right now, we've looked at the season, but what one of our recommendations was to extend that parking season based on the volumes. So let me page very quickly, because I certainly don't want to take up any more of your time than necessary.
No. You can provide it to us later, that's fine.
Absolutely. Okay, so right now, the summer season is May 15th through September 15th.
Right. For parking defined.
For parking. Now, what we're seeing, obviously, and I kind of talked about it in my presentation, but the increase in volumes happens earlier in the year. It starts happening really in March, April, leading into May. So if we extended the season, maybe we include a portion of that. Maybe even it's at again, this kind of goes to that idea of demand-based parking, right? Do we have parking out there? Are we charging for parking? Maybe it's at a lesser rate than that peak summer rate, but we do start charging for parking earlier in the season to kind of get that little bit of management of traffic earlier in the season and then later as well.
One thing, also, if you would investigate for further, I know in discussions with June, who has been doing this for a few weeks, let's put it that way, that if memory serves us correctly, at some point, maybe in the 80s, we did do weekend parking meters for weekends, Fridays and Saturdays. These were when we had the meters were bagged during the week, but they were opened on Fridays and Saturdays for parking. So I'd like if you could explore that option for, again, these week or shoulder seasons, to look at that. And let's see. Speak about the parking garage. Was there any recommendation for the number of spaces for a garage?
Not yet. That's going to take a little more significant study. So again, part of our recommendation is just continuing to pursue that parking garage as a more detailed study in and of itself. The financial viability, there's a number of different things that we go into evaluating the parking garage, its location, all of that. And that's kind of
through that quite a few times, so I understand.
you've been
the
through it a couple
metrics.
different times. There's a whole lot involved in it. So again, just kind of keeping it on the table, understanding with the data that we now have, well, in theory, it doesn't have to be, within the downtown core. Maybe it's within those 3 blocks or more away from it, and then kind of understanding with the traffic numbers and the parking numbers and all of that, how that might change the study. And the
Based
outcome.
on my past experience with this, we've gone through this exercise on several occasions, and I think the only aspect of that formula that has changed is the cost per space, which today, currently, as my research has gone at a precast, it's $26,000 per space, and if you will, a traditionally built is $42,000 per space. So you can kind of work the numbers even on 100 spaces for that. That's quite an investment for whomever. Yeah. And also, you talked about private downtown shuttles. Just to be aware of that, there are several local area housing developments that already do this. That we do not charge them. They don't get a pass. They don't get anything. They just bring a busload of people in, drop them off, then pick them back up later in the day. So I think that's something we should investigate also, is to, if that is the use of our beaches, we're supplying trash pickup, lifeguards, police, all of that. There should be a fee involved in that with regards to that. The other thing was, wanted to know, one thing that comes back to my mind through this is a number of the things we've touched on here, and you highlighted in question number 10, continued maintenance of sightlines, et cetera, code enforcement. And I think in my review of today's agenda, that phrase code enforcement is going to come up quite a bit. So that's something that I would also like for you to investigate further of, is there code enforcement that can be specific for traffic or, as we see, sight lines or something of that nature? But again, maybe a perfection or highlight a little bit more on code enforcement and how it could affect traffic within the city. And the other point, last one, is the issue of private shuttles or something of that nature. We also have a number of hotels now that are running, if you will, golf cart shuttles between their properties and the beach and back and forth. And personally, I think that is a very wise use of traffic management, if you will. So if you could explore that a little bit more of how we could encourage more of that, perhaps with facilities, not only limited to hotels, but other facilities, apartment complexes or something of that nature. So just a little look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else up here?
I just have one
Bonky?
I know certain members of our business community seem to be like kind of very cognizant and aware when the last day of parking, when free parking is coming or when free parking is going away. And I would think I guess what I would like to, if possible, if you could sort of verify or validate whether that works. And what I'm specifically thinking of, if we had like free parking Mondays or something like that at various times during the course of the season, or maybe during the shoulder season or something like that, would that actually drive any kind of significant business that would be meaningful, that would be worth doing it? And I'm just curious if you have any other sort of collateral experience that would say yes, no, or whatever. I'd just like to kind of know more about that.
Our understanding and the approach to the parking study was really the focus on reducing congestion, especially during the peak seasons. So I think the idea of free parking during peak seasons counterproductive to that measure or to that goal. But that's really all I can offer right now for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Anybody else up here?
I just have a final
ma'am.
request. This photograph at First and Rehoboth Avenue that you took on 8/11/23, I sat there the other day waiting for the light to change, and I could not pull my car out into Rehoboth Avenue because I could not see. And I'm just wondering, can someone, I don't know who the right person is to ask now, but can someone take a look at the sightline problem and fix it at First and Rehoboth Avenue? Because I experienced that myself and thought, this is absurd. Thank you. Check into it.
With that, I'd like to go to the members of the public. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this parking study introduction? If not, we'll come back to the commissioners. I want to let you know that this report will be embedded in the agenda. Give Ann till Tuesday, if you would, and you'll be able to access it at cityofrehoboth.com and click on the lime green box, homepage right center, and that'll be the portal, and it'll bring you up and to the calendar, and just pick this date. You'll be able to access it. If there's no further comment, do you have any further thing? Anybody, June or anybody? Yes, sir.
One point of information for us, it comes back to budget and what have you. Revenue from parking supplies almost 24% of our annual budget. So it's another opportunity. And again, that is a fluctuating, it's not like a property tax that's pretty fixed. Parking revenue can vary down and up. So something to look at again in the future with regards to how it impacts our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we thank you, Alexis. Anne Marie, we appreciate you being here. You can sneak out if you like. With that, we're going to go to the next item of new business, which again, as I mentioned earlier, it would be new business H. Let's see what that says. That is to discuss recommendation of the VIA to replace the Lake Girard fishing bridge or fishing pier. Evan?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So roughly a year ago, we were approached by the VIA about the interest from an anonymous donor in improving the fishing pier that currently exists at Lake Girard. This led us to begin analyzing the existing fishing pier, which had included at one point a structural analysis, which was contracted through Beacon Engineering. Following that structural analysis, it was determined that if the pier was improved, that it should be replaced. And the pier does have some historical significance. So at this time, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Kate McKenzie and Rosemarie Patton from the VIA. They're going to present some of the history around the fishing pier, as well as some of the discussions that we have certainly had with them, as well as the anonymous donor that had approached them. So if you ladies would like, you could go to the lectern up there. And then after Kate and Rosemarie give their presentation, I'd also like to turn it over to Bob Palmer, who's with us today from Beacon Engineering. Bob would be able to address the condition of the existing pier, as well as some of the designs that are included as exhibits within today's agenda. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate.
Thank you, Evan. Mr. Mayor, when he comes back, Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you for having us today and allowing us to talk about this. I'm going to give you a little brief history, although you probably already know about the VIA because you gave us a commendation back in March during Women's History Month. But I'm going to remind you who we are. We were founded in 1909, so next year we're going to be a 115-year-old women's club. And what do? We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to serving the Cape Henlopen region, not only with our volunteer services, but also with financial support. We have two objectives, which is how we got into the fishing pier business: promoting the interest and improvement and progress of Rehoboth Beach, and also performing whatever charitable and civic works that are the greatest needs of Rehoboth Beach and that are approved upon by our membership. So we had a time after 1962 and into 1963 where the children's fishing pier was destroyed on Lake Girard because of the storm of March 5th through 9th in that year of 62. We worked with the city and we collected debris and built a fishing pier. I gave you a handout, and in that handout there were a few pictures, and it's just this, wanted to give you a little, pictures are worth more than speaking, right? The first picture in that is a beautiful picture of way back when. Yes, sir.
Ann, can you put the document camera on, please? You want to do it? We're going to put the pictures on the
okay.
screen there
Okay.
for you.
Oh, wow. Magic. Up on the left is an old picture of what Lake Girard looked like. The one to the right is the debris that was used to make the fishing pier. There is the fishing pier on the bottom left. The picture on the right is where we hope a new fishing pier will be. Talking about the fishing pier, I would like to introduce Rosemarie Patton, past president, and she's going to talk a little bit about the history of the fishing pier.
Thank you, Kate, and Mr. Mayor and the commissioners. I was not around in 1962. I was in high school in Ohio, but I've been here for about 25 years. And I want you to know that my uncle, I don't know if any of you remember, Michael DeFiore, he was the alderman. That's how I got here. So in 1962, if you were here, there was on Ash Wednesday a nor'easter that plummeted and whipped the beach territory for 3 days. And after the storm passed and looked around, the VIA clubhouse was damaged, but it was nothing compared to some of the beach properties and homes. Now, we had a president at that time. Her name was Lucille Corcoran, and she was very much involved in Rehoboth and the city. Her husband was Colonel Corcoran, who developed Henlopen and Acres. She was instrumental in doing a lot of things, and she was a really go-to woman as president. And after the storm, she looked around with the other members of the VIA and said, what can we do to help our city? There were timbers from docks and the boardwalk that were just floating. And so they convinced the city fathers at the time, if they would collect all that wood, the VIA would raise money to build the fishing pier for $600. And it happened. Now, at that time, there were very little things for young people to do. Besides the beach and funland and fishing, there were really no parks or playgrounds. But what happened were there are a lot of young children who would take their fishing poles right on the Lake Avenue, because Lake Girard was right there, and plop it in the water and fish. And so they thought, the VIA, if we could build a pier, get the kids off the road, and they would have the opportunity to fish. And glory be, that's what happened all those years. In 2007, when the city was building the new bridge, there was talk about not just dismantling the pier. And again, the VIA ladies at the time, and I was there then, we petitioned the city and convinced them, don't tear it down. So it's been there, kind of hidden by the piers of the new bridge. And we know that from our workings with the engineering people, that those same piers from 1962 that were probably there many years before the building of the bridge have really withstanded a lot. So with that, we wanted to celebrate in 2018, and we worked with the State Archives Committee to place a marker there, a historical marker, because that just adds to the history that is memorialized in Rehoboth Beach. So with that, when an opportunity came to do something different, we want you to listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's where I step back in. So one day, being at the clubhouse on the north end of the boardwalk, there was a tap, tap, tap on the back window. And here was this gentleman saying, I'd really like to talk to you because I have something to offer. And we went, oh my, what's this all about? What it's all about is someone who is dedicated, highly dedicated, spent his life on this fishing pier. And he does not want anything to happen to it, wants to provide funding for us to move forward and to put a new bridge up where the kids can go for generations to come, and to make it really a worthwhile location for the city of Rehoboth and for all the visitors who come and the residents who are here. So as we have done, we took his ideas and we contacted Evan and others. And we have been working together to see what kind of plans can we do, what can we put together, how much is it going to cost, and when can we do it, if indeed you approve this going forward. So at this time, Evan, can I pass it back on to you? Thank you all.
Can we
Yeah, what
pull this on the screen?
Sure. So next, as I indicated, I wanted to turn it over to Bob Palmer, but maybe first, if there are any questions for Kate, we could entertain those questions at this time. Again, Bob will address the current design that's shown in the exhibits of the agenda, as well as the structural analysis that was done.
I'd like to put up put up the drawing here, and then I'd like to have 2 minutes just to review history
Sure.
of the bridge before I hand it over to Bob. And can you put the air media back up? Oh, there we go. I'm just a stroll through memory lane. Prior to 2007, where this bridge was completely tore down and replaced. Can anybody remember? I thought there was a footbridge on this side. Does anybody remember? Well, I thought there was just a footbridge all the way across there. I have to check old memory, but I do know that in the old days, before the bridge, the fishing pier actually had an exit off this side. And when they redesigned this bridge, I think the bridge was a little wider than what the previous bridge was, and they decided to take that off. So there you go. If you can see the orientation here, let me blow it up a little bit for you, Bob, and then you can take it over.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Bob Palmer with Beacon Engineering, and we've been working with the city for decades now on various public works projects. And I can remember when you could pay $0.25 to park on Rehoboth Avenue for an hour. So, as Evan had indicated, we, back in March of this year, we performed a structural evaluation on the existing pier. And as was stated, the pier was constructed from salvage materials. So largely the superstructure is made of, creosote timber piles. The pile bents are creosote, as are the rest of the substructure. The part that's visible to the general public is generally pressure-treated timber materials. Has been replaced over the years as the decking and railing and whatnot have become damaged or deteriorated. And with this being the first structural evaluation, it really wound up being a baseline of what do we have and what should we do. And one of the primary things that we found, other than the fact that it was built in 1962 standards, we found that the overall structure has racked, so it's no longer a square, so the sight lines are no longer parallel with one another in varying degrees across the structure. There's elevation changes in the decking, and there's also a lean to some of the pile bents, 3 to 6 inches in some cases. And so what we don't know, because there are no records back to 1962 of how this structure was built, we don't know whether that lean, whether that racking, is it something that's occurred over time and has stopped, or is it something that is continuing to migrate, and will the racking continue? And so regardless of what is decided to do with the pier, there should be maybe a biannual every 2 years. The structure should be continued to be evaluated, and interim measures should be made to stabilize the pier, improve its safety for the users. We recommended a limitation of 25 people on the bridge at any one time and no major gatherings, especially gatherings like a aerobics class or whatever, where the unified movements of folks could create resonant frequencies in the structure that could cause a failure. We've seen those in the national news over the years with different things that have happened. And so, speaking to the overall structure of the pier, with it being made out of creosote piles, given the age of the structure, those piles may or may not be continuing to leach materials into the lake. You know, the lake is very important to everyone in this room and the city as a whole, and so an environmental benefit to replacing the pier would be to remove those materials that are we've all learned are not as environmentally friendly as they were once used in that condition. Something else that we learned about the overall structure of the pier is that there is no discernible connection between the piles and the structure itself. There may be hidden, but this was an observial type analysis. There was no destructive testing done. So there is concern that the pier itself may not be physically connected. It may be a static load that's allowing the pier to rest upon the bents. The railing doesn't meet current standards. There's a wire fabric that's been placed around the lower perimeter to keep folks from stepping aside as a safety measure. All of those things really need to be looked at if the pier is to continue to exist in its existing fashion. It's also not ADA compliant, and what I mean by that is there's really no opportunity for someone with disabilities to utilize the pier as for the purpose of fishing. And so as we worked through the design development with the members of the VIA to understand what it is that is desired of this facility, we looked at things of that nature. And so over the course of the summer, we prepared a number of different possible solutions on the east side of the lake, on the west side of the lake, multiple solutions at one time. And in the council packet, there's actually two solutions that really became predominant. And the one on the screen is more of a centrally located pier. The other solution, and I'm not sure if that's something that could be brought up on the screen, is a more northerly pier orientation, both of which would use the existing pier access point so that we would maintain integrity with the city's no-build policy around the lake. So there would be no new connection to the shoreline. We would reuse what is already there. We also looked at sight lines from both the north shore of the lake and the south shore of the lake to really understand a pier placed in a different location, how would that pier affect the overall views and vistas from the private parts of the lake. And we provided some insets, and I actually included some 8.5 by 11s in the exhibits that show sort of a wireframe sketch. We're at a very, very preliminary stage, so only sketches have been prepared to keep costs to a minimum. But anyhow, those exhibits show the how this pier might look. This is a view from Lake Avenue looking in a southerly direction. And so you can see in the overall plan, there was a desire for a covered area of the pier for caretakers, for folks who are interested in going out onto the lake but not necessarily fishing, someplace for them to enjoy the lake, whereas the balance of the pier would be available for fishing opportunities. And so this northerly view looking south, you can see in the background to the left between the white truck and the shrubbery is the existing pier, and it's really rather it blends well into the landscape. And so the intent was for the pier, the proposed pier, to really follow that same philosophy so that there's minimal loss of view, which was part of the reason for the placement of the gazebo in that orientation. And then if we could go to the next slide, which would be...
I don't know which, I've just got 3, concept 4, concept 5, and the rendering.
I gotcha. Okay, Mayor, if you could go maybe to the second page in that third exhibit.
Oh. we would need to, we don't have that,
Okay,
we
do-
don't have that embedded, so if you want, Ann, put that,
If you could go to concept
we'll put
4,
the document.
you could go to concept 4 and then zoom in.
There we go.
there you
There
go.
we go. There we go.
So this is a view from Cranberry Park, the open space that surrounds the south side of Lake Gerard.
Thank you.
And so this is a view looking north towards where the pier might go. And so you can see towards the right, obscured from view because of the vegetation, is the existing pier. And so that dock or gangway that runs between the gazebo and the vegetation, that would be the access point, the dock, if you will, towards the pier, the gazebo, the covered area, and then the fishing pier would be towards the east. And so, you know, while it does have a more impactful view, impact on the view shed, both locations that we have proposed essentially, they essentially allow the pier to be nestled in ways that don't detract from the, you know, the overall view of the, you know, view of the lake and whatnot. Part of the thought process with the construction would be to try to reuse some of the existing components from the existing pier. And given that the deck and the railing are probably not original to the pier, we looked at the superstructure itself and whether and how to use some of the cross bracing that's above the water line, some of the structural timbers that are supporting the existing pier. And one of the ideas was to incorporate those into the gazebo portion through the roofing system possibly. Another solution might be to construct some seating areas using that material and, you know, improving it so that it's, you know, current standards, current use, sort of thing. We're currently budgeting we're working with a couple of contractors, a couple of vendors to understand the order of magnitude of cost. We've discussed low maintenance, maintenance-free decking, railing, seating systems. But the intent would really be to fit into the existing nature of the city of Rehoboth, so it would predominantly be a timber structure or a structure that looks like a timber pier, similar to what you find on Silver Lake. Some of the bridges that the footbridge that the city has that connects the school to Stokely Park, things of that nature. So with that, I'm starting to get into the weeds on the discussion, so I'll stop and ask if there's any questions.
Speaking of weeds, just a couple. Is there any talking about lighting or anything for the pier?
Sure. Commissioner Gossett, we actually talked about that at our last strategy session with the VIA. And the current proposal would be for this facility to be a dawn to dusk type structure, as is the existing pier. So there was no intent or thought of providing electricity or lighting or anything like that at this time.
And would either of the design options here have, or what type of impact would they have on the aerators or the bubblers in the lakes? Has that been looked at?
We're aware of that. We haven't dove deeply into that matter, but the intent would be that any pier, any aerations, any part of the aeration system that might be within the footprint of the pier, we would be working with Envirotech to ensure that they're located in a location that would still continue to benefit the lake.
this may be hard to respond to, but with regards to the design and materials, is there any life expectancy of the structure?
The current structure?
No, the new structure.
Oh gosh, so the existing structure is 60 years old. I would think the new structure would last well beyond the 60-year period, probably. I would say probably 80 to 100 years if properly maintained.
Hopefully, that would be great. I'm glad to hear that kind of information. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Bob, there's an appearance that this new envisioning is larger. Is that true? And if so, by how much?
It is, and I would have to get back to you on the second question.
I mean, would you say it's significantly larger than what we currently have?
No, I would
No?
say it's probably no more than 50%. Where the enlargement comes, Commissioner Sharp, is from the seating area, the covered seating area. That's certainly an add, which expands the footprint of the pier.
So is it fair to describe this as we think about it as a re-envisioning in current modern terms of this pier?
Yes, I think that's fair.
Because what did occur to me is obviously there's a need for it to be modernized, if you will, to use that term. But there wasn't an approach to just replace it exactly as it is today with new materials.
We did discuss that, actually, Commissioner Sharp. We did discuss simply removing the existing pier and replacing it with modern materials. And the philosophy was the lack of visibility, so the potential increase of use for the children that live and visit the city. And it was also an eye to potentially improve the fishing opportunities, as well as to improve the overall visibility of the bridge, because on the westerly side of the lake, unlike on the easterly side, the bridge is very prominent, it's very visible, whereas on the easterly side of the lake, it's really hidden, if you will, behind the pier. So those sorts of thoughts went into the migration of the structure either into the lake or toward a northerly, location closer to the North Shore.
And am I understanding you correctly that you don't have any idea of cost, even general costs at this time?
We're between 200,000 and 2 million, so no.
Oh, well, that's quite a range.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But the offer is that the funding's going to come from a donor, correct?
Well, that was my follow-up question is, did the donor with this very nice offer commit anything to a 100% funding, or I couldn't tell from the documents,
Right,
is
it's
this
not
a
on there.
partnership request, or what is it?
No, it was, the original thought was to give us X amount of dollars and to be able to, at that point, to just upgrade what was there and have money for an escrow. But after the study was done, we went back to the donor and said, yeah, this is not good. We're going to have to build something else. So that's where we're getting our data together to see how much more would be advisable from him. So I don't have that answer for you right now, but it's a fair amount for right now.
But is the goal to ask the city to partner in some financial sense, or no? I'm not clear on if you're going to be asking for taxpayer funds or no.
I can't answer that at this moment because I don't know how much it's going to cost, first of all.
Okay.
Because Bob's gonna deal with that and let us know, and then we are going to get back to our donor, our anonymous donor, to see where he stands in that amount of money. So I can't answer that right now, but we're hoping that we can provide for some of it, and then the city can help with the planning, with the permits, and some other things for like maintenance later on down the line.
Thank you. Well, I do think it appropriate that if it's at the end of its service life, then we need to design something. And I guess the concern might be that if the city is going to totally fund it 100%, then we might design it one way. But if we get extra funding, whether in entirety or partially from a donor, or the donor and the VIA, or the donor and the VIA and the city, then we might come up with different concepts and everything. So I think it would be appropriate today, perhaps, to give feedback on this. I see proceeding forward with a design concept so that we can evaluate the funding needed for it. Some of my thoughts on it are that this is one situation that's I'm always cautious about nighttime use. And obviously, we could keep it closed at nighttime, perhaps. I'm concerned about the pavilion and seating. And that concern is based upon seating on the boardwalk pavilions now with the group of kids, I call them, that take over these things. And so that would be a concern. This is a little different situation than the gazebos on Silver Lake, because all the gazebos on Silver Lake are privately owned, correct? So this would be a publicly owned thing, and so that we at least would get to control it. But that does mean that the public would be able to use it, except for any hours limitations we put on it. The view shed, once you start doing something new, and especially you put a three-dimensional item on it, then that's the pavilion that's now sticking up. You change the view shed quite a bit different. So I think we need to go talk with some of the property owners in that area to try to get their buy-in on it, hopefully get their buy-in on it. And then so the next thing for me is the location. This situation here, I really studied it on the screen there. The octagonal gazebo with the octagonal deck, I think it looks great. That extension on it for this design does not excite me at all. In fact, just the opposite, because if you look at it, it puts that gazebo directly in the center of the lake. And I just am concerned about view shed, whereas if we look at the second design concept, you could do it without that extension or with the extension, but I personally like this better. I just am shy of putting it directly out into the center of the lake. And are there any other comments up here before we go to the members of the public?
I just had one comment, and I think this is, I think it's great that someone's willing to step up to make whatever contribution they're proposing, but and whether that's to be in addition to something that the city would consider doing itself if the city felt it was time to improve the existing pier or so forth. I would just like to add, I think there's another need in town that if we were looking at this sort of holistically, in my neighborhood of Schoolview, we have what is affectionately known as the Turtle Bridge that connects the school property to Stokely Street effectively and goes by the Tot Lot Park, or whatever you want to call it, which during the season primarily, that is a destination for people to engage their children in a memory, I think, that they had as their own children, where to see turtles. They call it the Turtle Bridge, and there's a lot of turtles there for whatever reason. My concern there is that is a thoroughfare, and people use it to go to and from the two locations from Schoolview into town and vice versa. But when turtle observation season starts, it really becomes a bottleneck because people just sit there and look at the turtles and all that kind of, which, you know, and I think the turtles actually enjoy it. So anyway, but I've often thought, actually, when they did a couple years ago, when they did the dredging of the end of Silver Lake, they took the dredge spoil off to the side and kind of corralled it in an area where they put these little bats down and kind of create a little more land on the shore side of the lake there. But I've often felt that that would be an ideal site for a turtle observation post that people could go to if it was like a little deck or some kind of thing that would kind of, you know, similar to what a gazebo would be, but wouldn't need to have a cover on or whatever, but at least to kind of free up the thoroughfare of the bridge for people to congregate. So I would like to propose that if we're thinking about this, I'd like to throw that into the pot.
Well, I think that would be appropriate discussion during our budget talks.
Yeah, right.
And everything.
Okay.
And maybe we need to evaluate the service life of that at the same time. Yes, ma'am.
May I add something? You brought something up about people and their kids and their turtles and their memories. The donor actually tapped on the window and talked to us because he spent the majority of his youth every year coming down. His grandparents lived here, and they were here all summer long, and that fishing pier helped him get away from his 3 sisters and enjoy his life away from his sisters. So he just enjoyed it so much that he really, really wanted it to be able to be available for future generations. And if we can go 80 to 100 years, get out. How many generations is that? So that would be a great thing if we could pull that off. So I ask you for your consideration, and thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
One other question, Bob, for you. Not to hold you to this, but any ballpark guesstimate from, if you will, demo to ribbon cutting timing?
It depends on when we start.
Well, seasonal, obviously, but.
Well, yeah. There's a number of intangibles, Commissioner Gossett, that we've looked at, and in no particular order. And I thought I had my schedule here with me, but I don't. Our intent would be, depending upon how the commissioners feel about this initial proposal, would be to come back at the February 5th workshop with renderings, with a little bit further along, with a budget, with a real proposal of how the money would flow, that sort of thing, and proceed through engineering and begin the permit process in March. And one of the intangibles is subaqueous lands permitting between the Corps and DNREC, and there's 2 permit pathways. If we replace the bridge, the pier, if we replace the pier in kind, there's one method of permitting which you can imagine is relatively insignificant. It's quite a different permit process by relocating the pier to another location. What we have going for us is we're in the same general locale, so it isn't like picking it up and moving it over towards the easterly end of the lake. So that's an issue that we'll have to navigate. And permit turnaround time through DNREC is in the many months to years from application. So it really, once we get the design process done, it largely depends upon the permit process and how long that takes. The expectation would be, regardless of the year in which we begin, we would launch the barge for the pile work and the in-water work after the high season, so it would be a September, October, November timeframe. Be out of the lake by March 31st because of there's fish spawning seasons and things that we understand from other DNREC permitting that, you know, the state really wants us out of the water by the end of March. So the pilings would be placed, and then by the time we're, you know, that would be a relatively short duration period, and then everything above the water, it could proceed independently. So I don't think I fully answered your question, but maybe gave some perspective on what we're battling.
Well, you gave me a perspective, and I just want to test, did I hear this correctly? If you would like to actually start your permit process with the state in March of 2024, backing up from that, the most critical decision point for us would be whether or not this would require any taxpayer funds.
Correct.
And those discussions begin in January and end in March. So how can this even be considered for a March 24th permit cycle to begin when you're way late, in my vision, because we don't know at this point what the donor reaction is going to be, nor do we know yet, and maybe you'll have it on February 5th, but we're well into our budget discussions on February 5th, if any of this is intended to have taxpayer funding to assist. Does that make any sense? Am I getting this, or no, gentlemen?
That's
Bob,
correct.
if we were to agree to a concept 4 is or 5 is the one that's up there. If we were to agree to a concept, do you have to do any more engineering drawings than what you have now to determine what the approximate cost is? Because we could get a ballpark price, then the three parties, the VIA, the donor, and the city get together and figure out, is there a city contribution or not? Because you make an excellent point. We're on a timeline again.
Correct. Mayor, to answer your question, Commissioner Sharp, very good observation. We are actively working on budgeting for the pier, and as you pointed out, Concept 4 and 5 are essentially the same design. It just there's a rotation in Concept 5 that 4 doesn't have. We have the information we need in order to develop a reasonable order of magnitude budget that would be within 20% or so of what we might find if we bid it relatively soon, within the next year, say. The nexus for seeking a February-March permit phase is simply because of what I shared with Commissioner Gossett, which is the sheer length of time that it takes for us to secure a subaqueous lands permit, well, anybody for that matter, to secure a subaqueous lands permit from the state. And so understanding that it would be a physical impossibility for us to potentially hit fall 24 construction, the reality of it is we're looking at, again, if everything goes according to plan and the costs come in correctly and there's good decisions between all of the different parties, that we would be looking at a fall 25 construction realistically, and that really is a result of the permit process. And to kind of conclude, Mayor, the schematic plans that we have, and there's actually more data than what we presented today because this was really more of an introduction, so to speak. We do have some preliminary designs for the superstructure itself that we could use with the state and Corps permitting. We really are just looking for a location at this point.
Thanks, Bob. And just, I don't want to get the cart too far in front of the horse, but we're really just kind of rolling this out today. We've had some consternation expressed about public-private partnerships, a la the canal dog, right? So we wanted to roll that out to you. Is this something we want to pursue because we have a donor? We don't know whether the donor would want to pay for it all up front because we don't have that estimate yet.
Right.
But we've spent a little bit of money doing this preliminary analysis, and we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Just wanted to roll that out to the commissioners and see, is this something we really want to pursue or not? And you could say, no, we don't want to do it with any other partnerships. If we want to do it, we want to do it in-house. Great, we'll proceed down one path. So that's the thing. I don't want to say we're picking a way to go right now because we just don't have cost factors well enough defined.
And I appreciate that. I think what I'm rolling around in my brain is the optics of our constituents. I can hear the phone call. So, Commissioner Sharp, the city is going to fund, right or wrong, okay? The city is going to fund in part or in whatever percentage, a fishing pier, whatever we decide to call it as we go on. That's the intent of it on Lake Gerard. Now, how does that fit in with the other priorities in the city? I can hear that phone call.
Absolutely right.
And I think that's very fair.
Correct.
So I think if it gets reported in the Cape Gazette that there are intentions to go for permitting, people's ears perk up at the use of the term permitting. And I know it takes an extremely long time. However, that does convey some intention, and it could get very muddled with our constituency whether or not the city is going to be contributing, and how does it fit in with all the other priorities that I'm sure we're going to be discussing shortly.
Sure, and we have not brought that
Right.
to the committee for prioritization or funding, you know?
Right.
So right now, we're trying to get to the point where we have a realistic cost estimate that we can go back to the donor and say, what does the donor want to do? Are they willing to fund the whole thing up front?
Right.
Because just too many unknowns at this moment to come before you and say, do you want to build it, or do you want, if they're willing to build it, those kind of things. But we just wanted to get it out there. If there's a desire to move forward with pursuing a public-private partnership in one form or another, whether it's a cost share or whether they pay for the whole thing, that's the direction we're trying to get.
Well, if the donor were to decide it was within their vision to 100% fund, are there other costs that the city will have to incur that would be our part of this, Kevin?
Correct. Certainly the continuing maintenance of it
Right.
could possibly be on us. If the price comes in at $50 to build it and he's going to donate $1,000, there may be an escrow be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know until we know that number. So we have I don't know that we know what they are
Right.
willing to contribute, but until we have that cost. If he's got a dollar amount and to build it is half of that, maybe the other half would go into an escrow for maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's reasonable to assume that if they build it, then we would probably operate and maintain it going forward.
Well, I'm willing to invest in city time and money to go to the next step, which is having Bob do enough of the design that you can give us a cost estimate. I think once we have that in hand, as Kevin said, that we can go to the different groups and go forward.
I agree.
And it may be something we push off, it may be something we abort on, but at least we know that the fishing pier is at the end of its service life or approaching that, and that some kind of action has to be taken. In the worst case, we tear it down and it's not usable. And I think that would be a horrible idea, but funding maybe.
So Bob, could you just clarify for me one thing? As you looked at it structurally, is it safe for current use?
Up to 25 people,
Got it.
no assembly space.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just had one comment in terms of when you're putting together the budget and the costs. I would recommend maybe we get two numbers, one with and one without the gazebo
Sure,
on it,
we
just
could do that.
because I'm sure that's going to be an issue in terms of the view shed. But if we know then, I think it would be helpful to move it forward.
Sure.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Anybody else here? If not, members of the public like to comment? Go ahead. Just state your name and your relationship to the city. Ann, is this microphone on?
Yes. I believe it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it on? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. I really like the idea of improving the fishing pier there. It's an amenity that brings people to town. When we have family come to visit, we can take the kids over to use it, and I think it's a great amenity to have. This town is supported by visitors, and anything that brings people in is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? And your name in relationship to the city.
Dave Diefendorfer, city resident. I thought that was a fabulous presentation. My only concern with this is when he says limit right now of 25 people and no dynamic loading. That's only 4,000 pounds or 5,000 pounds on that bridge. So you didn't send divers in the water, correct? You didn't check okay. So I agree with doing something to this, but I would be, when I hear a limit of 25 people and no dynamic loading, I'm a little concerned what the structure is like on the bottom.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody else? Thank you very much, ladies of the VIA. I think I speak in front of you in January. Hopefully, this is resolved by then, and I'm looking forward to that. And otherwise, you also are free to leave, but you're also free to and welcome to stay for the next 3 hours, if you like, to the end of the meeting. Thank you. Now we're back to our regular agenda schedule. We go new business, the B, which is outdoor dining on public space. There's two components here on outdoor dining on public space. One is to receive a report from B&L on the efficacy of regulations for outdoor dining on public space. The goal there is to get a report from the code enforcers from B&L on their observations, any problems they had, any comments, anything in the code or guidebook that needs amendment in their opinion. So we'll receive that first. And then the second is just a review of the city design manual for outdoor dining on public space and Chapter 215 restaurant code for any desired changes relating to outdoor dining on public space. That's an opportunity for the commissioners to be able to comment on the code. If you recall, when we passed this and codified outdoor dining on public space back March 2022, we said that we would come back and at some point in a year's time and to be able to receive an evaluation as well as for us to comment on it. With that, Scott?
Well, good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, and members of the public. Regarding outdoor dining, we currently have 5 restaurants that have successfully completed the licensing process with no pending applications at this time, most of which are now closed for the season unless they're heated. But with the barriers remaining in place as allowed under the current rules, I believe then we can have that available for nice weekends and holidays and such like that, so they could still take advantage of that through the season, weather permitting. So overall, it appears to have been a successful program with 0 documented complaints, and that would be noise or otherwise. The exception would be just a little concern with the occasional barrier creepage, which we're working on methods to keep that from taking place, and the occasional stray A-frame sign concern, which of course we know is not limited to the people utilizing the outdoor dining, and is something else that we'll be addressing separately in the coming months to make sure that they're licensed and properly regulated. With that, that's about all I have for the outdoor dining. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to.
Scott, could you just name those 5 permits that have been issued?
Yes, we have Nalu, Masons, Lupo, Fins, and Claws.
Fins and Claws are owned by the same owner, and then you have separate owners for Nalu, Masons, and Lupo. Over the Sea Witch weekend, I did walk by one of these restaurants, and they had a plastic barrier up, just like a fence that you would put in your yard, and it was all busted to pieces and everything. So I helped the manager move it out of the way and try to prop it up enough to get them through the weekend and everything. But one of the questions was about the ability to fasten to sidewalks. And if you recall, in the code, it says you may not attach to the sidewalks. And I think I pointed out to him to go look at other barriers that seem to be successful without a physical fastener attaching it to the sidewalk. So it is possible. So that's thing. And Patrick, Commissioner Gossett and I were largely, I think, the authors of the outdoor dining on public space guideline. And so there's a couple things that I would like to bring up, and maybe meet with you, Patrick, and Evan, and building and licensing on. And that's in particular to look at the outdoor dining on public space for corner properties. I'm not satisfied that what we said, that's a 3-foot setback, is really adequate, considering that corner properties have ADA transitions from the street onto the sidewalk. So I would like to review that before the next time we put this on an agenda. And as well as I've mentioned previously, I think, at permanent compliance for Sirocco, the desire to change the requirements for the application to include a drawing of the street curb line, and then I'd like to add the ADA transition. So there are a few things there. I don't need to take time today, but there is certain section of the code that refers to outdoor dining area will be located adjacent to the building facade. And if you recall, we recently changed that and adopted the amendment in the design code that the dining area tables can be against the building or against the barriers. So we'll look at the wording there. But does anybody have anything else they would like us to take a look at in terms of the design guide manual?
I do not.
Okay.
The only thing I'd like to add, Mayor, is you'll recall back on September 15th, the mayor and commissioners adopted an ordinance to amend reapplications for outdoor dining on public space. So one thing that we will have to address in the design manual is the reference to the expiration on December 31st. So we will have to take some of the language that was approved from that ordinance and bring it into the design manual, and we will certainly do that as part of this process.
And that's different than your C, discuss a resolution to amend existing license agreements for outdoor dining on public space.
That's a similar topic, but this is purely just updating the design manual to reflect that language.
Okay, we've got it. That's the trouble with doing things in two places. You change one, you forget to change the other. Anything else up here? Scott, we appreciate you being here and giving us that report. Sounds like a good report overall, so that's great. Thank you.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Next item of business is exactly what I said, discuss a resolution to amend existing license agreements for outdoor dining areas on public space. Evan has an oral report and explanation for us.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm actually going to turn it over to the city solicitor.
Thank you, Evan. So this is a draft resolution stemming from in September at the regular meeting on the 15th of September. The Chapter 215, Article 5, outdoor dining was modified. In relevant part, one of those modifications was the removal of the durational limitations to 1 calendar year for license agreements. As we just heard, there were a few license agreements issued before that time. Nalu, Lupo, Masons, Claws, Fins, and then on that same day in September, there was a license agreement authorized for Sirocco. But I believe that they were not starting outdoor dining until the spring. So those license agreements that were issued contained the durational calendar year limitation. They ran through the end of this year, so they expire at New Year's, except for Sirocco was authorized to go through 2024 calendar year. And so this resolution is limited in scope. It is, the purpose of this resolution would be to authorize the city manager to take the limited action of entering into addendums to those existing license agreements solely for the purpose of extending the duration of the license agreements. It makes clear that the licensees are not granted relief from any other requirements of the license agreements or Chapter 215 or the outdoor dining on public space policy manual. And then one other thing I added in here was that if the city manager determines there's an exceptional circumstance where he feels that a license agreement needs to be elevated to this body to change the duration, that can be done. But it's very limited in scope, and this is just a draft at this point.
All right, so we can get a copy of that and embed it in the agenda. That'd be all right. Does anybody want it read today versus having it embedded in the agenda?
Does that, I'm sorry, does that call out just those 5 restaurants?
It doesn't specifically, but I added prior to October 2023. And another option you would have would be to add a specific duration that the license agreements would be expanded to, or leave that up to the city manager. And instead of doing this resolution, an alternative approach would be to have each of these groups come before this body again and ask for an extension, but that might not be the most efficient way to proceed.
No, not at all. Yeah, any members of the public want to comment on this? Again, we'll embed it in the agenda, and so this will be on, I don't know that we need it on the workshop agenda. We can take it to the January regular, no, we put it on the December regular meeting for a vote. Any other comments? Anybody? All right, thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the next item of new business, which is discuss renewal of lease with Division of Parks and Recreation of DNREC for Deauville Beach.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll give a brief history on this. So actually in March of 2023, then City Manager Lawrence Christian was contacted by the Division of Parks and Recreation concerning the lease for the property referred to as Deauville Beach. The existing lease was entered into on July 1st, 2013, and then the term was 10 years. So it expired June 30th of 2023. The division had inquired as to whether the city wished to continue its use and the lease for the property, which we had indicated that we did. The division then had requested information related to the property, mainly in terms of capital improvements, services that we provide, recreational opportunities that we provide down at Deauville Beach. And so they requested that information related to the property, and then they provided us with a new draft agreement that is more in line with their current managed property terms and standards. So the document that is contained within the agenda is the original 2013 lease with track changes made to reflect the changes that were made over the course of the last few months as we negotiated with the Division of Parks and Recreation. Most of the changes that you will see were reflected of the division's, again, preference to reflect other managed property in terms and standards. A few items that I'd like to mention explicitly that I had worked on with them and entered into some negotiations on was, first and foremost, the division originally requested 15% of revenue from concessions, parking, and from tennis court rentals. In talking with them, I was able to negotiate them down to 10% and 10% of parking revenue from parking passes sold at Deauville Beach only. So excluding tennis court revenue as well as concession revenue. And then secondly, the biggest thing that I had worked on with them was revising the exhibit, which is contained within the lease to reflect the current areas of the property that we maintain. So notably the tennis courts, the parking lot, the beach, we do provide beach cleaning, and then the dune crossings as well. The original area pretty much encompassed all of what you think of when you think of Deauville Beach property. That's everything from Surf Avenue east, including the beach, and then I think as far south as Oak, maybe even further, and then even included a piece of land just across the street from Deauville Beach. So we've updated that the exhibit contained within the lease. And then again, a majority of the additions, the blue underlined, came from the Division of Parks and Recreation, again, to reflect their most recent terms in their lease agreements. So at this time, I'll entertain any questions that you have. Again, this is just before you all for your consideration. If there are any questions, I will certainly entertain those questions and then take any comments back to the Division of Parks and Recreation as we continue to negotiate this lease.
FYI, Evan's been working on this many months. And I just want to compliment him because it's been a lot of work on, back and forth with them negotiating. I think it's kind of a silly lease for us in terms of it's expansive. It applies to all other properties that DNREC deals with. They've got a note in here about liquor liability and certain requirements. You know, I hate having it in there because we don't allow liquor. And while it says if alcohol will be served, you've got a liquor liability. I just think that there is a lot of extraneous wording in here that's not needed. But if you can't get rid of it, then so be it. That there are also things like extra work for us, I see it.
Yeah.
And that vendor background check requirements. You have to check your vendors for sex offender requirements and different things like that. And we do have a vendor. In fact, they mentioned vendor and employee in the same sentence, but we do have one vendor, and that's Cats and Linehams. And then we do have employees. So it's just, to me, it's just a lot of extra work. If you pared it down the best you could, then I'm fine with it. But there's some wordsmith things that I'll check with you offline that don't need to be done here. Is there any commissioners that have any comments on this?
Is it true that that 10% parking, I guess, which would now be the lease fee, that's new, correct?
That
was
is
not
new.
something-
Correct. So originally, the lease was for $1. I think there was an initial $2,500 fee up front, and then for every single year, it was a $1 fee. So the revenue is a new piece. Again, they originally wanted 15% of parking concessions and tennis, and we were able to negotiate down to 10% of just parking. They did mention that 8% is generally consistent with other arrangements that they have for properties, especially properties where they have concessions. I did push for 8% of parking revenue, and they pushed back, and we're pretty firm at the 10%.
Do we know what that annual amount would be?
So Deauville Beach revenue is typically anywhere from $100,000 to $120,000, so anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 a year.
Thank you.
10%, 10 to 12,000 a year.
Yes.
The original fee was $1, but no, it said a lease fee.
I think there was an initial $2,500.
$2,500 for the term of the lease due upon the lease administration. Well, to me, that's $250 a year. So what am I missing here? That $250 a year plus the year dollar on an annual basis versus $10,000 or $12,000. That's quite a bit of difference.
Yeah.
Am I reading it wrong? Page. Item number 3, it says lease it used to say administrative fee. So you're interpreting that as an initial upfront fee of $2,500.
I believe that's, yes, because the $1 is referenced earlier in the now therefore paragraph. So
Yeah.
paragraph 3 now reads, lease fee, the city shall pay an annual lease fee of 10% of all daily parking and annual pass revenue sold at Deauville Beach.
Okay, so the administrative fee, $2,500, is a one-time thing. Otherwise, it's an annual rent of $1. So we're going from $1 to essentially
10 to
over
12.
10,000.
Right.
Wow.
I would entertain any questions or considerations from the commissioners. I think this is as comfortable as I was willing to be in terms of negotiation with the Parks Division before coming back to them. So if there are any other considerations that you would like me to bring back to them, I could certainly do that on your behalf.
Evan, is it, just curious, are we still on a month-to-month lease?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And down in under 4B, under maintenance and investments capital, it says the city should not be responsible for any damage at storms, hurricanes, windstorms, ice storms. The phrase also is used at times acts of God. I don't know if that is kind of common knowledge. And the non-lease revenues, that's, do we know how that addressed? That's numbers, well, I guess it's really, maybe, it doesn't have a number, but it's page 3 there, under, right after number 9, taxes and lien, the non-lease fees, revenues. I guess it's just a change in terminology.
Yeah, the way I read that is, again, that would be any revenues that are not subject to the 10%. So revenues for, that we bring in from Katz and Lynham operating their concession stand on Park, and revenues from the tennis courts are required to go back into recreational services.
And just for administrative purposes, we're able to earmark those funds? So
Yeah, so certainly the tennis court is pretty easy to do. I did have some conversations with not only the division, but also with Katz and Lynham about how we think it's fair to break out what that revenue would be. Again, because it's not just the snack shack, but there's also the umbrella stands, chair rentals, and I think they operate 2 stands at Deauville Beach. So we have worked that out.
And just something on number 14, insurance, as the mayor brought out about workers' comp and general liability. We may want to have a conversation at some point in the future with our insurance companies about the leases that we have with other organizations, the museum, the chamber, historical society, senior center, to address those same issues. I don't know whether it's worthwhile or not, but just to kind of double check those.
Sure. And just briefly, while we're on this topic, I did check with the insurance company, and we either meet or exceed the requirements from this lease.
Did DNREC give a rationale for the exorbitant increase? Looks rather greedy, and I wondered if they had a
I think the biggest rationale was, again, to maintain a lease arrangement that is comparable or similar to other lease agreements that they have. Again, we did push back a little bit only because we provide all of the maintenance for the site, we provide all the capital improvements for it, and so 10% of the parking revenue was where they were comfortable. So.
Right. Well, I have faith in you, but it just.
2 other questions. I mean, on number 28, time if of the essence. Do you know what that reference would be used for, or it's at time if of the essence? I don't know if it's is of the essence or not, but the parties agree that the time is of the essence as to all provisions hereof. I'm not understanding what that connects.
What number?
28.
28.
That may just be standard boilerplate language. I can take a closer look at that. Yeah, and there are a few items in this contract I want to touch base with Evan on, probably offline, just to make it a little easier to swallow. Because there's a few things I don't like in this lease, but we'll try as well as we can to fix them.
Okay.
Just one other question about if it's affected or not, but our ocean outfall runs under Deauville. Right. Is that addressed at all, or do we need to address that?
What I would recommend maybe to do that, to clarify that, is there's Section 4, Maintenance and Investment in Capital Infrastructure. So there, again, the city agrees to maintain and repair the capital infrastructure of the property. So in there, we call out parking lot, buildings, courts, et cetera. So we could call out the ocean outfall as part of that too.
Okay, because again, in Exhibit A there, I don't know whether that area that the ocean outfall runs from surf around should be a part of it or not. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
All righty, thank you very much. Our next item of business is E, discuss committee recommendations or opinions on the matters of these three items. Possible allowance of, would like public comment on, go ahead, come on up.
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. Where it specifically calls out revenue sold at Deauville Beach, didn't we do away with a Deauville Beach specific parking? And if that's true, and somebody buys their parking somewhere else and drives into Deauville Beach, they already have paid for it?
Yes.
How do you, I mean, do they not get it on that? And if that's the case, can't we get everybody to buy it somewhere else?
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
That's a good point. I mean, so as the lease is currently written for any permits sold at Deauville, we do still sell permits at Deauville Beach, but we also still accept permits that are purchased elsewhere, whether they're the free transferable, the free non-transferable that the property owners receive, or whether they're permits that have been purchased at one of the kiosks, either on Rehoboth Avenue or Bayard Avenue, or from the parking department. Certainly with that change that happened a while ago, we do not sell as many permits as Deauville as we did before when Deauville was its own parking lot. But let me just be clear. So any permits that were sold outside of Deauville Beach, that revenue would not be captured as part of this lease. Yep.
That's all.
Jay LeGree on 7 Prospect Street. How many other situations like this that do you know of where municipalities lease beach property from the state?
I don't know of many. I'm sure they're out there. They are out there. I don't know if Lewis utilizes a similar arrangement for some of their beach parking, but I wouldn't be able to speak with confidence.
I can't think of any, not unless there's something inside of Fenwick, but all the rest of these are state-run, the parks and everything.
Mm-hmm.
We're putting millions of dollars into Delaware's economy with our folks who come to visit us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
We have an out of this lease. We're able to get out of it after 1 year if we want. Okay. Walter, go ahead.
Walter Brittingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. 2 thumbs up. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. There are so many of us that don't know what all goes on in there, and I appreciate the work that you put into that. Just a side thought. Ocean Outfall pops into, is that in Rehoboth? Is that in the state? Do we need to consider annexing that piece of land? Thank you.
Well, Deauville Beach is within the city limits of Rehoboth. Yeah, yes, it is. All right, next, are we ready? Move on. Next item of business, discuss committee recommendations or opinions in the 3 matters. Possible allowance of leash dogs on Deauville Beach or other specified beach sections from sunrise to 8 a.m. during the summer season. This is be a presentation initiated by the Animal Issues Committee. Number 2, possible extension of dates and/or hours when dogs are allowed on the boardwalk and beach, also by the Animal Issues Committee, and comment by the Boardwalk Committee, and then possible amendment of ordinances to allow for coordination of times and hours, dates between certain ordinances by the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, I think, initiated that. And you can see all kinds of documents there. You have it up there, or I have it
I
on?
do not have it here, if you could.
Okay, I've got it on my screen.
And then how do I make it larger?
Well,
right.
that's because I have it on my screen. And so you don't have any control of it, I do, unless you bought a thumb drive to put it on yours.
No, but I know it's embedded into the,
And that's what
That's
this
what it is.
is,
Okay.
yeah.
all right, I'll do my best to read through them. Mayor, how do you want to handle this? Do you want us to just present our 3 recommendations and then discuss them, or do you want to discuss them individually?
Yeah, what I'd like to do, I think is, for ease, is to have you go through your whole presentation. And then I'd like Lynn to get up and talk about the Reach Out Rehoboth, including some charges that it has flaws, had flaws, and where we're at today with it. After that, we'll come back, after you've done all 3, we'll come back to you, see if you have any additional comments, then we'll go to the Beach and Boardwalk Committee. Former Commissioner Jay Legree here is here to talk on behalf of him being chair of the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. Thank you, Jay, for being here. And then we'll go to the commissioners and the public at some point. Just FYI, after that, there's another topic is to receive reports from the advisory committees on their committee activity in the past year. And then in a future meetings, we will have discussion about, from the committees, on what their ongoing topics are and potential future agenda topics are. And then we'll get to, I'm not sure which meeting, but in the future, we'll get to a resumption of the discussion about the potential to sunset the advisory committees and replace them with a singular generalist committee. So that's coming up into the future. So Commissioner Bennett, go ahead, start off.
Sure. So welcome, everyone. I'm Tim Bennett, the Commissioner and Chair of the Animal Issues Committee. And this past spring, there were 3 issues that were brought forward for the Board of Commissioners consideration. And one of the issues, or a couple of the issues, of course, have garnered an awful lot of discussion based on Reach Out Rehoboth, as well as the Beach and Boardwalk Committee, which has also weighed in on some of these. So the first 3, or the 3 recommendations that are there, the first one I think is fairly simple. It's, and this came to us from resident Dave Diefendorfer, and it was to standardize the season by changing the dates dogs are allowed on the beach and boardwalk to match the parking dates, and essentially, in effect, create a season for us, which we've heard a lot about today. What is our season? We'll get into these in depth after the initial phase here. The second one is consider allowing dogs on the boardwalk in season until 10 a.m., similar to bikes on the boardwalk. And number 3 is to explore an area of the beach where dogs would be allowed during this season from sunrise until 8 a.m. So the next slide. So currently, dogs are not, so this is related to creating the season for dogs on the boardwalk. Currently, we do not allow any dogs on the boardwalk from May 1st through September 30th. And we're simply just recommending or asking that we change those dates to May 15th through September 15th to match the season of what we do with parking, to simplify bikes, people, and dogs on the boardwalk. So that's the first issue. The second issue would be allowing dogs on the boardwalk in season until 10 a.m. Currently, dogs and other animals are not permitted on the boardwalk, as we said, from May 1st through September 30th. The committee recommends that we allow dogs on the boardwalk until 10 a.m. during the summer months, as we do with bikes, as long as, of course, as the dogs are on leash. And again, this would go as well with the proposed change of the in-season from May 15th to September 15th. The Beach and Boardwalk Committee was not in favor, I will say, in watching their meeting and changing any of the rules for dogs or animals on the beach or boardwalk. So this goes to an issue that we've discussed a couple months ago regarding committees, is what committees take precedent. Is the Beach and Boardwalk have precedent over animal issues? Does animal issues have precedent over allowing dogs on the beach and boardwalk? And it comes before us, I guess, as the commissioners to make that decision. Reach Out Rehoboth did do a survey, which Lynn will discuss shortly, but the results were 57.1% of stakeholders that were in favor of allowing leashed dogs until 10 a.m. during the season on the boardwalk. Next slide. The third issue was to allow dogs on the beach in season, so that would be from May 15th through September 15th, if that was in fact our proposed season. We unanimously, as a committee, voted to designate an area on the beach. The committee recommended Deauville Beach, knowing that it needed to be enforced. There was some discussion about actually hiring an enforcement officer to monitor that area to make sure that the dogs are off the beach by 8 a.m. or whatever time we picked. And the other issue was not putting this on to the lifeguards. This is not a job for the lifeguards to do or to monitor. And perhaps we could make, if we sold beach tags and/or permits for dogs on the beach, that would pay for the enforcement officer. Also, again, from Reach Out Rehoboth, it became a positive 57.1% of people were positive about that idea. And I believe those are, unless you want to get down into some of the nitty-gritty, that is the overall gist of our recommendation, 3 recommendations. There's support materials behind, as well as the Reach Out Rehoboth charts, and also the rules from each of the coastal towns are attached as well as to when dogs are allowed on the beach. I will say that the issue that seems to come up over and over again in some of the comments I've had from constituents, people are very passionate one way or the other. Enforcement is an issue, which we all realize has been an issue not only with dogs, but with a number of things in the city, and that needs to probably be a bigger discussion. And that's where the conflict had come in with the Beach and Boardwalk Committee. We've had some issues this year, despite putting up signs, despite trying to have further enforcement, particularly down on Prospect Avenue and by Poodle Beach. And as we mentioned earlier, people don't want to read signs. So it makes enforcement difficult. So I don't know if you want Lynn to go through some more results, Mayor, of the survey, or?
Yeah, Lynn, if you would, what I'm looking for is, are the Reach Out Rehoboth results in his presentation accurate? I know you made a few changes at one point. And then is there anything further you'd like to articulate that? And then we'll come back to this exact slide and talk about the 3 topics in front of us.
Are you set for me? And Ann, could I show my document, please? So I appreciate the opportunity to explain what went on with the launch of Reach Out Rehoboth in this particular survey. So hooray, we managed to come up with a survey that people were interested in and passionate about. So we had a lot of responses. But there was an issue that I want to acknowledge. So when we launched Reach Out Rehoboth on August 25th, the Hot Topic survey was accidentally set to be open. We had opened the survey so that we could share Reach Out Rehoboth with certain stakeholders before it launched, and then we simply forgot to change it back before the launch. So when we launched on August 25th, people could take the survey multiple times, and they could take it without registering. By the morning of August 28th, so from Friday morning to Monday, we had 1,248 survey responses from 279 people. So on the morning of August 28th, we changed the settings, and we made it so that you had to be registered and you could take the survey only one time. We did inquire with Engagement HQ at the time, our consultant, about the possibility of filtering out the multiple responses, but we were counseled that we couldn't be sure that we were not eliminating valid responses. So she did tell us that we could filter the responses in various ways, and 3 of those ways are in the presentation that Commissioner Bennett made. All responses, were considered, and then we filtered for registered responses, those who registered on the survey, and then we filtered by city stakeholders, those who identified themselves as residents, property owners, or business owners. And then further, these charts show I did a filter by those who responded after August 28th. So these charts demonstrate all responses at the top received after August 28th. So these people took the survey only one time. And then the bottom is city stakeholders who responded after August 28th.
Just for clarification, the green is positive.
Right, the green is yes, leash dogs should be allowed on the beach. The yellow is no, keep the rules as they are. And in this chart, blue is yes, allow dogs on the beach. Orange is no, leave the rules as they are. And this kind of lays out all 5 of the filtering. The first is all survey responses. The second would be registered responses, city stakeholder responses. And then the 4th and 5th one are after August 28th responses by everyone and then by city stakeholders. So the bottom line is that no matter how I filtered the data, survey responses favored allowing dogs on the beach during limited hours in the summer season. The largest difference between the filtered responses was 5.6%. That's the greatest discrepancy in responses. So it appears that there were more multiple votes for keeping the rules as they are than there were for allowing dogs on the beach. As I said, people on both sides of this issue were very passionate. I received several emails from lots of people. I would like to add that we did make it clear to respondents that this survey did not determine what was going to be adopted. This was but one piece of information to be provided for commissioners' consideration on the topic. And then just to update you, so the traffic survey we did, we had our settings right. People could only take, a registered person could take the survey only one time. Right now, we have 1,865 participants on Reach Out Rehoboth. 1,792 are active. That means they've clicked on the link they were sent to access the site. And 674 have been tagged as active city stakeholders. So what this means is they have identified themselves as either a resident, a property owner, or business owner, and I have gone in and checked to make sure that that data is accurate based on the information they provide. Some of the common mistakes made are somebody might say, I'm a visitor, and then they pick the neighborhood that they visit. And then others might say, I live in the city of Rehoboth Beach, but when they get to the map, they say, I don't live inside the shaded area. So when I've tagged them, I have made sure that they've answered both questions accurately. We did consider asking people to provide their address when we set up our registration, but we felt like we wanted to provide people with some anonymity to be able to respond to questions on Reach Out Rehoboth. We can request addresses as part of the surveys we develop in the future if we decide that is something that we want to do. I know that some people have talked about multiple registrations and cheating on Reach Out Rehoboth as being a problem. It can happen, but experience from other communities and based on the data that people are providing, I don't think that it is a significant issue. So I'm happy to address any other questions you might have.
Any questions about the, specifically the Reach Out Rehoboth poll?
No, I think Lynn did a great job of expressing exactly what was uncovered and how it was fixed.
Any members of the public have a question? If not, thank you very much.
So I just want to say, so what for consideration for the Board of Commissioners today is that we have an Animal Issues Committee that has voted unanimously for yes, and we have a Beach and Boardwalk Committee that has voted unanimously for no, and we have Reach Out Rehoboth that looks like the results overwhelmingly were yes, in terms of however they were sliced. So that's what's before the commission today.
Thank you, thank you. So I put on your first slide back on. You can sit down if you like, Commissioner. What I'd like to do, I think, is take these in reverse, go address 3, 2, and then 1. Time appropriate, we'll have City Manager explain his chart about the parking dates, et cetera. So first on our plate is to, let's see, possible, I'm going by the agenda. Possible allowance of leashed dogs on Deauville Beach or other specified beach sections from sunrise to 8. I put or other beach section in case this conversation went elsewhere, or why don't you do the south instead of the north, or but what's on the plate right now in front of us is dogs on the beach in the mornings only, in the season at Deauville Beach. So we've got a positive response, favorable response from the Animal Issues Committee. We'd like to go to the Beach and Boardwalk Committee. Would you like to come up and just reiterate? We do have your support document, but Jay, if you could just summarize what your committee's opinion was on this topic of dogs on the beach at Deauville.
I suspect that all of you have rewatched the stream of our 31 March meeting where we talked about this for a little less than an hour. And and I have, this support document is a condensation of those discussions that we had. And we were just the opposite of the Animal Issues Committee, because we're talking about the boardwalk and the beach. We have some real problems with putting a dog park on the beach because of the fouling of the water. And we already are getting high bacteria rates some of the times in Lake Gerard and Silver Lake, and those both dump into the ocean. And so we're concerned about fouling the ocean. And I think the comments that we received from stakeholders, and I have some real problems with the stakeholder identification in the Reach Out Rehoboth. We got a considerable amount of negative comments from the public, from stakeholders. And Dave wrote a letter came and spoke at the 31 March meeting in favor of dogs on the boardwalk at the same time as bicycles. And we discussed that also. But, and my support document speaks for itself, but our main concern was enforcement. It's not being enforced now. We allow dogs on the beach right now, leashed, and on the boardwalk, leashed, for 7 months a year. If we would, for 8 months a year. And if we would go with the parking, it would be down to 7 months a year when dogs would be allowed on the beach and boardwalk. And we heard Rossi say that we need to extend our parking times from 1 May to 1 October, which is a 5-month period. Now, are we going to change all these again whenever we change parking dates? I suspect that we will be having parking permits from 1 May to 1 October pretty soon, not too long from now. Right now we're not, but I think it's coming. So the times will change, and I guess that's okay, but we're hesitant. We're in favor of the idea of making everything the same. That just makes a lot of sense. So I guess we would be changing our dogs on the boardwalk and beach to the same times that we're not allowing parking meters. And that's okay, but it's flexible. my wife and I belong to Lewis Unleashed, which is a dog park. And it's over in Lewis. It's private. It is highly controlled, because if they don't control it, their liability just goes sky high. Every time a dog bites a little kid, he bites them in the face. I'm guilty, and you carry those scars for life, and I'm guilty. But that can be a tremendous liability for a city if you're having to pay $1 million or $2 million in compensation for some little kid who was bitten. Our dog park does not allow anybody under the age of 9 to come into the dog park. They allow only adults to accompany other between 9 and 18-year-old kids that come in the dog park, because that's what their liability insurance requires. So are we going to keep 9-year-old kids off the beach so they can't be around it when the dogs are running? I just don't know. It's a real liability problem. Lewis Unleashed has a fence around our dog park, and everybody has a fob. The gates are always locked. You go in, and we don't even allow little dogs to be with big dogs. No puppies, no dogs that have not been neutered are allowed in the dog park. And for us to talk about that in an unregulated area, unfenced area, open area on the beach is really risky. I don't know how Deauville Beach can reconcile the risk that they're undergoing. Of course, they don't have any money, so you can't get a lot out of them, but they are undergoing by letting all those dogs on the beach. I mean, it's something. When you walk down Prospect Street and look towards the Dewey city limits, it's a quarter of a mile. And we all have all these people coming down Prospect, dogs, people, kids, everybody having a good time. To think that they will be going a quarter of a mile to get to the Dewey Beach city limits where they can pay a fee to let their dog loose. Not many of them do. Most of them just stay close and run up and down on county property. I'm kind of responding the way our committee talked, and I talked about the date. One member of our committee is 7 people on Reach Out Rehoboth, and she didn't do that to break the law or anything. She was just checking the system out. And she had no problem voting 7 times. She has 7 different email addresses, and as you remember, that information is all self-delivered on Reach Out Rehoboth. There's no verification that goes on other than I suppose they could go back on your sites or location or call your phone. There'd be a lot of ways to at least do a primary screening to get your address to see if you're really a stakeholder or not. I'm on there without using a fake name, and I take part. But so we don't really think that first off, it doesn't make sense when it compares to the feedback we've been getting as committee members. So we're not sure we agree with that survey. And our final thoughts were, if we don't enforce the ordinances that we have now, there's no use even doing anything different. But I'll take questions.
Well, Jay, let's just review. You went and did all three topics there, and that's fine. But in terms of exploring an area, recommendation by the Animal Issues Committee on the exploring Deauville Beach specifically, where dogs can be allowed to play from sunrise to 8 a.m. Your committee is against that.
We don't think the city should have that liability.
Okay.
I just want to clarify,
Yeah,
though,
yes.
that's not, it would not be a dog park. It would just be simply people would have their leash dogs there. And that was the recommendation of Deauville Beach, but if there was another location, we'd be open to that as well.
Right. I just interpreted that as it's literally when dogs are on the beach, it's an unfenced area that acts like a dog park.
Doesn't the state law kind of say that?
Yeah, state law, they must be leashed, yeah.
Whether they're on the beach or whether they're
They must be
loose?
leashed on the beach. You must have the dog on a leash on the beach.
And that's, you're not letting them off leash then?
No.
Okay.
No, this is just simply allowing people to go down to the beach with their dog before 8 a.m.
Okay.
And designate an area. And then Dewey also has a full-time person, so that's how they're doing it. They have a full-time person that manages their area.
Why would they have a full-time person is managing people with dogs on a leash?
Yeah. And they
Okay.
collect tags and licenses and fees, and that's how they
Okay.
pay for it. So
So that
that
would
was the
help
other
your
recommendation,
liability.
Dewey, right.
Okay, we assumed you were talking about a dog park in a confined area on the beach.
No, no.
Okay, then they might want to rethink that. We did say that we don't want dogs and bikes on the beach, on the boardwalk together. We talked about that.
Well, that's the second one, Jay. Consider recommendation for the Animal Issues Committee, consider allowing dogs on the boardwalk in season until 10 a.m. And then they have to get off by 10 a.m., which mimics what the bicycles restrictions are. What was your?
We didn't think dogs and bikes should be on the boardwalk at the same time because the boardwalk is getting more crowded as time goes on. Dogs hate bikes. Dogs don't like little kids fooling with them on the boardwalk, and so we thought that was a dangerous thing.
Okay. And then the first one was standardize the season by changing the dates dogs are allowed on the beach and boardwalk to match the parking dates. You
And I just talked
indicated
about
that
that,
you all were in favor of that, so.
Currently, we allow dogs on the beach 7 months.
All right.
And that would change it to 8 months if we agreed with our current parking times.
If you don't mind, before going to the commissioners, if we go to the public and then go to Evan, who did that chart on codes that have specific date restrictions on them. Is there any members of the public that would like to make comment on any of these three topics here? But your name, your relationship to the city, and then identify each topic that you might be talking about.
Yep, Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. I guess this would apply to all of them, that obviously enforcement is key. And that's the only way anything's gonna work for everything in the city, not just for this issue. We have to be able to enforce our rules. I would also say that, and my husband's like, you gotta come up with a different way of saying this, but you can't fix stupid. People that are responsible dog owners are going to make sure that their dogs are properly leashed and that they are kept back. I have a golden retriever. Many of you have probably met her. If there's a dog that appears vicious, I do not let her get near that dog. If there's a dog that appears overly rambunctious, depending on the type of dog, I don't let her get near the dog. Bikes are a bigger issue, in my opinion, from a safety standpoint on the beach than the dogs are. We see people riding down the beach now, riding down the boardwalk now, coming through. Like, they don't want to give the pedestrians the right of way, let alone somebody with a dog. You're not going to fix that. I think you have to keep in mind that if somebody is responsible, they're going to do the right thing. And I think we need to allow our residents to get the benefit of this beautiful place and being able to walk their dog. There's no issue in my mind with letting somebody walk their dog on the boardwalk. And I think Tim is right. Worse, dogs have to be on leashes. I wish we could control the type of leash they're on, but we can't. And a retractable leash is better than no leash. So I would say that. The other thing is, we have issues right now when 90% of the people that are walking around are residents with their dogs leaving us a present and not picking it up. We need poop bag dispensers around town. It's an easy way to allow people to do the right thing. Everybody should walk with poop bags, but the fact of the matter is, sometimes your dog goes more times than the number of bags you have. It happens. But those are the key points I think I want to make, is that you're never going to come up with rules that are going to take care of the people who are inconsiderate. But we have to do a better job of enforcement, and I don't think restricting what we're allowed to do with our animals should be dictated by the number of people who are irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, members of the public? Carol and then Dave.
Lean it forward. Carol Everhart, Rehoboth Beach, Deauville Beach Chamber of Commerce. I just want to speak in support of additional poop bags, because that is something that I'm asked quite often by the visitor. And the other thing is anything that keeps it consistent. Whatever your timing is that we finally decide on, time of year, time of day, the more consistent it is and the more standard it is, the more easy it is for the visitor to understand. That's it.
Thank you, Carol. Dave?
Good afternoon again. Dave Diefendorfer, city resident. So as Tim said, I had brought this up at the at his meeting. I'm looking to just expand the time as a city resident to be allowed to walk my dog on the boardwalk. On 1 May, when I walk on the boardwalk, there's not a soul on that boardwalk before kids are still in school. We go up there in the morning. There's no reason in my mind that not allow the dog to expand the time at a minimum on the boardwalk. And again, when the kids go back to school at 16 September, there's not a soul on that boardwalk at 8 a.m. that I am endangering with walking my dog. There's a few bicyclists, there's some people walking. But anyway, I would like to just see the time expanded to allow dogs on the boardwalk. I'm not a big fan of dogs running loose anywhere, especially on the beach. Everything should be leashed, but I'm just looking for at least allowing a city resident, a tax-paying resident, the chance to walk the dog on the boardwalk for longer hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Charlie, identify yourself in relationship to the city.
Charlie Garlow. I live at 82 Sussex Street here in the city. Proud to be a Rehobothian. Just as to the comment of my good friend Carolyn, there is a possibility of using one plastic bag to pick up a double gift. In West Virginia, we call it the West Virginia hand warmer. Thank you.
That works. That works. Thank you very much. Anybody else? If not, let's bring it to the commissioners there. I intend to put this on the agenda for a vote at the next meeting. So if we want to just share ideas at this point, if there's a consensus to not do something, then I'd still rather have it a vote.
Can I just say
Yes.
something to somebody that may know the code better than me? I remember reading it, but this goes back to enforcement again, which I think all the committees are concerned with, and we're all concerned with, not just with dogs. But I believe there is, within the rules of Rehoboth, that dogs are not allowed to even be on retractable leashes. Is that?
I think it's a
that-
6 foot leash.
I don't think it's addressed.
Is, and I was, because I've heard conflicting, that's what I wanted to get clarification of.
I think it says either 5 foot or 6 foot.
It just says leash.
So, but maybe we should look at that as well. But again, that just becomes another level of enforcement that if we're not stopping people running dogs loose, let alone, oh, you have a retractable leash, just adds a level of complexity there. But I think we should look at that as well.
And Commissioner, in case it's helpful, I found 88-15B3. It says dogs must be restrained by an adequate fastened collar and a leash or lead that is 6 feet or less in length when not on the owner's property.
6 feet or less, okay. It doesn't, okay.
But they go beyond 6 feet, right?
Yeah, they go like,
So can we maybe elevate our conversation just a bit out of the weeds here? For me, if y'all could indulge for just a second. Having given this a lot of thought, one of the things that I think all of us can agree to is that one or two things is happening with enforcement. Either we do not have any intention of enforcing some things in our code, or we do not have the resources to do the enforcement as we would all prefer. So one of the things that's troubling me is that we're just on the cusp of having discussions relevant to resources at a very granular level, I hope, as we go into the budget cycle starting in January. The other thing is that as a commissioner, this is the most difficult piece, I think, when you have differing views coming out of two committees. And I think I've already spoken on how I particularly feel about that. But the position I'm in right now is to take a holistic view of what is in the best interest of the public good. It's not about the Animal Issues Committee. It's not about the beach and boardwalk. It is about the public good. And we have a certain system right now that has dates, it has things that should be enforced. And to me, that is the crux of this issue. So, Mayor, if you believe that we should be voting on things where I do not believe that we have, I honestly think we're jumping the gun on the enforcement issue. I'm the one who worked with Lawrence Christian and Lynn Cohn to reflect back on the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association board members who came to see us. I believe it might have been last December. And they stood right where Jay is and expressed to us over and over and over again their number one primary concern is enforcement. And to be put in a position to telegraph to that group, we acknowledge we do not currently enforce many things, including the dog issue, but now we're going to make things more lenient. And I don't care what it is. It's just this philosophy, this principle that, to me, we're putting the cart before the horse, or the horse before the, whatever that saying is, but I feel like we're jumping the gun, we're not addressing, we're tinkering around the peripheral of what our issues really are. And if we would spend our time more defined to come up with the core of all this controversy, in my opinion, and from what I've heard, is a lack of enforcement. So I don't understand why we're talking about what is the make or break issue in my head. And as commissioners, I think we have to take a holistic view of the public good. So that's my concern about it. That's my perspective about it. And everyone has great ideas. They put a lot of time and effort into things. But the way we're structured puts this commission in a position that we're the ones that have to arbitrate, really, more specific positions as opposed to a holistic view of our community. So
I think that's very well said, but in my opinions that I'm going to give you are for protecting the public. My opinions are that Deauville Beach, as far as, or anywhere, putting dogs on the beach in the summertime during warm months, that's what all the discussions have always been. Every time this has come up in the last 20-some years, whenever there are warm months, dogs have been banned from the beach. And that's because of the feces that get on there, and people just kick sand over it, and it's a fact. That's what happens. So I'm against any dogs on the beach in the summertime because of bacteria contamination. There's also no fencing on the north, south, or west sides of those areas. There's no enforcement. See, so, but you see that there's no enforcement. I'm not waiting for enforcement. I'm making the decision based on today, what we're able to do. And then leashed and unleashed, there are too many people. We can say leashed all we want, but they're going to be unleashed all the time. And why? Because it's, I don't know, it's from observation that is a fact. And unfortunately, irresponsibility does carry the day. That's why we have a lot of rules for no speeding and everything, because of the people that do. We have irresponsible dog owners that don't clean up after their dogs and stuff. And unfortunately, the responsible dog owners get penalized. And it's just what happens. But that's my position on that. That has nothing to do with whether we have enforcement or not. I'm determining that we don't. And the second one is allowing dogs on the boardwalk in season till 10 a.m. For the public good, I can't vote for that because I've been up there enough times in the morning, anywhere from 6 a.m. on, and there is a conflict between dogs and leashes and dogs on and off leashes and bicycles. I can't in good conscience do that. And you know what? There's no enforcement mechanism there that sways me one way or another. Now, if we said you could go on till 10 a.m., then you need the enforcement mechanism because people will be on there till 10:30, 11 or something. Then the last one is standardize the season. Evan has yet to do his report, and I'd like him to do that. You know, standardize the season by changing dogs from May 1 to September 30th to coincide with parking would be May 15th to September 15th. I've been reluctant to there because frankly, we got to pay money to change the signs. And I'm worried about getting a little too close to the beginning of summer, but I think I could acquiesce to that one, considering that it's only adding 2 weeks at the beginning, but it's subtracting 2 weeks at the end of the season. Net results the same. So again, the enforcement mechanism, I agree it needs to be talked about, especially I guess during the budget season, on what is going to be enforced and what's not. But for me, it doesn't really get into this because my assumption is that there's not going to be any enforcement.
So Mayor, and we all have talked about enforcement, but would you be supportive if there was enforcement?
Oh, no. I
So
guess
even
that,
with
I
enforcement.
I guess that was my point.
So even with enforcement, you're not for allowing dogs on the beach in season and/or dogs on the boardwalk till 10, even if it was enforced?
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to make the distinction in listening to Commissioner Sharp speak. It's not, I don't feel it is as though we're like blindly not enforcing. I mean, I think it's whether we can effectively enforce it. I don't think there's an effective means to enforce this, unless you're going to have like dog watchers stationed along the beach or something like that. I mean, it's just, I just don't think it's feasible. If there were a feasible means of doing it, maybe we could consider that. But I frankly, the idea that we're going to be able to enforce or maintain that people are going to behave properly, we're not talking about dogs here. We're talking about dog owners. That we can effectively do that. Show me. I don't think it's. I currently don't think it's possible. So, so that kind of goes to your point. Why are we trying? Until that day, comes where there's some way to do it. Great, but we're not. That doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Sure.
So Reach Out Rehoboth, we had put in place to get more input from more residents. And however we slice the data, it seems that they are in favor of this, proposals from the Animal Issues Committee. So how are we going to square that when other similar topics come forward and our residents tell us one thing and we decide, well, we don't like what the results are?
Well, I would say, first off, when that question was developed, I don't think there was any, and Lynn, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be. I don't think there was a linkage between you putting that question up to any commissioner activity. I thought the reason you selected that question, which I said in a previous public meeting that I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and look at us now. So that, never mind. That one of the reasons you selected it, or maybe the main reason, was to get our audience to connect with Reach Out Rehoboth. We were trying to build that interest. Am I wrong about that?
You are absolutely correct about that. We were trying to build interest in Reach Out Rehoboth. At the same time, I knew from reports that the Animal Issues Committee had made that it was going to be a topic of discussion in the future among commissioners.
Well, good for you. I don't know that I knew that, but yes. But that was not the initial, and I take your point. I take your clarification. But it was, Reach Out Rehoboth is always intended to be a piece of information. So now we have different opinions. We have the best summary that I've read in a long time is on page 57 out of our pack, out of 78 pages. It is the summary that Jay has already referenced of the beach and boardwalk. And it noted the three very clear principles at the end, which are safety and liability, cleanliness and preserving the environment, and enforcement. And those three things articulated the way this committee and Jay has presented it to us, I don't think we've even spent much time even talking about liability. So to me, I don't see a reason to take this discussion further into additional meetings for a vote at this time, because I just don't believe we are where we're needing to be.
I can go either way. I mean, you know my position on it, and with that philosophy, it does not move forward, so it kind of coincides with some of my philosophy. So
However, what it does set us up to do, which has been in my head, is we have already acquiesced with this really bothers me, and I'm going to continue annoyingly bringing it up, the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association and what we promised them. We asked them for patience. That was what the gist of that article was that we put in there newsletter. We asked them for patience. It's been another year. And during our budget process, there is absolutely nothing in my head that prevents us from talking at a granular level. What do we really need in this community to enforce the things that the homeowners association very rightfully are becoming louder and louder about? If it's additional staff, then we have to decide, are we going to spend money to do that? It's either money or it's human resources that we're failing, because I operate from the philosophy, if the rules don't apply to everyone, they don't apply to anyone, in my opinion. So if our barrier is that we don't have the resources to do what we should be doing, I have no intention of complicating it with more changes that we won't be doing anything with. That's just, it's illogical in my head. But that's just me.
You'd be comfortable at the budget meetings?
Yes.
Under conversation about staffing to add that one topic, enforcement, in there?
Well, that to me is what's at the core of all of our issues, including code compliance. We could make the list that we dance around, and maybe I'm just as equally, I've been around for 8 budget discussions. This will be number 9. And I don't think, other than, dying on the hill of, I was going to not be satisfied until we had a communications person. That's one of the very few additions to staff that I've ever been really successful with. And I'm happy to look Lynn in the eye every time. So I just think we have to face, the time is past that we can promise the homeowners association that if they give us patience, we'll give them improved enforcement. And I would say, what have we done in the last year to live up to that promise?
Well, because of my position, I would have preferred to put this on the agenda and vote on it and get it off our plate. But following your path forward, Tony, maybe we just stand back if the other commissioners like that, and we just put it on hold until we can resolve the enforcement issue. Again, I'm uncomfortable with that because even if we resolve the enforcement issue, I'm still not for 3 of the 4 things. 2 of the 3 things.
Let's have a vote on December voting meeting.
Well, what's the pleasure of the other commissioners?
Well, can I say something?
Absolutely.
I think this is the frustration of, and I believe Commissioner Sharp brought it up 2 meetings ago, about our committee structure. I know Commissioner Sharnowski spent an awful lot of time with the Environmental Committee, and presentation ended up going nowhere because of enforcement. The Animal Issues Committee has now spent time on this. Again, sounds like it's not going to go anywhere because of enforcement. Quite frankly, it's a waste of all of our time to have these committees just sit around and come up with ideas that are just going to die on the vine up here. So we need to decide, is the committee structure correct? What are we doing about enforcement? Maybe these are bigger issues. But I think it's a waste of all of our times to have these committees if we're not going to either take them seriously or not consider what they're bringing forward. And that's that's my impression.
I completely agree with Commissioner Bennett.
Well then, what's the pleasure of the commissioners? We can just withdraw this and it sits on a shelf until the future time when we decide to bring it forward, and that's likely a future time after we've resolved the enforcement issue. Maybe it's a time in the future after we've resolved this generalist committee and sunsetting the others or not. Maybe we'll have a better path forward at that point. Patrick, are you going to?
Yeah, I think we are guilty of Band-Aiding things again. We look at things very myopically in a silo aspect. and we don't take a look at the, how this will impact, we've not heard, at least I've not heard any of this information back from the staff, the people that would implement this. Are they capable? I mean, do we have enough resources? Are we properly resourced to do that? You know, as Commissioner Sharp said, we sat here last December hearing a very long presentation from 5 different members of the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association, and was patience. And I think the mayor's response was, well, we're getting a new city manager, so we're going to let him handle that. Well, he began to handle that in a sense of expanding the code enforcement. We then, through that budget aspect, we hired or provided for 2 code enforcement officers. We had 2 code enforcement officers for about 3 weeks when one resigned. So we're still looking for another code enforcement officer. The chief has very great frustrations of the cadets, the police cadets that help enforce these during the summer season, if you will. We only had half of the cadets that we could have in place. We had funded them, but people are not responding to those because either pay or is it housing or what have you. There's so many other aspects that feed into this that we go out and make these little decisions. Oh yeah, let's add 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there, but there's no aspect from with regards to the staff and implementing that. And we so often do that, kind of put it in our outbox and yep, we made it, go take care of it. And I've sat up here too many years to know that the staff has never said no. They try to figure out how to do it and how to make it happen. And with the growth in the population, the growth in our popularity in the beach, I mean, we had 800 Santa Clauses out here over the weekend doing a bar crawl. Did we have any additional police force? Do we have any traffic force? Do we have any aspect like that? But it was managed. There were no incidents, if you will. So again, the staff responds, but there's just so long that the staff can do that without another, other resignations or finding different things of this nature. So again, I think this, I would agree with Commissioner Sharp, is to move this, or the mayor, to move this into a holding pattern, because earlier we heard about perhaps changing the parking season. So do we make the dog change this time and then come back a year later and make this? It's back and forth and back and forth. We have to look at this holistically, and we've never been able to do that. We talk about enforcement. Subjects that came up today, parking, outdoor dining, dogs, all of those relate back to the key element of enforcement, but we have not heard back from staff as to give us your suggestions. Could these happen? Is it worthwhile? And it is a matter of money, it's a matter of enforcement, and it's a matter of optics. Again, as Commissioner Sharp said, if we don't enforce it for anybody, nobody gets enforced. So I would strongly agree to put this into a holding pattern, if you will, or for whatever you want to call it that, and where we really need to look at the parking situation, because that's a revenue generator, which if we're going to increase our enforcement officers or the capacity of that, that's where the revenue is going to come from. We got to pay for it somewhere. I just think that we just are looking at this, to quote Commissioner Sharp again, bass backwards.
Unless there's any objection, then we'll put this in a holding pattern. I will not intend to put it on a future agenda topic unless I hear from somebody that wants to do it. I imagine we've got a lot of things to resolve by then, the enforcement issue, the hearing from the staff at some point, if this comes back to us, even the parking dates. And other dates need to be resolved before we can consider this. So is there any further public comment? If not, this is in a holding pattern. We'll go to the next item of business. Thank you very much.
And Mayor,
Yeah.
can I, one final thought, something that keeps rolling around in my head, that we all did, I think we voted, that the commissioners going forward need to have a greater say in what the committees are talking about.
Correct.
And all of this, kind of dovetails together with where we go in the future. But if we are committed to really seriously thinking about what's best, I know we can come back to all this. And Commissioner Bennett, I hope you very much do validate to the committee that I appreciate every hour, every discussion, every comment on reach out. But I think what overrides it at the moment is looking at this more holistically and figuring out how to navigate all the competing needs. So that's just a final thought, that I think we're on the precipice of being able to really confront our question, are we properly resourced to do what we need to do?
All right, thank you very much. With that, our next item of business is receive reports from advisory committees on committee activity in the past year, including a listing of agenda topics addressed, source of initiation of topics, and disposition of same. If you recall, the commissioners have asked for an accounting from each of the advisory committees in the past with an annual report on the disposition of their topics, specifically focusing on their successes. So this was not intended to give us ongoing topics that haven't been resolved or sent forward. It was not intended to talk about potential future agenda topics. That is a new mandate for the committees. And so at this point, we have a meeting at 2:00. The only other thing on our agenda really is discuss the contract for the replacement of well number 6. I'm willing to defer this if you want, but then it defers the conversation on committee structure another month. What is your favor?
Just for clarification, I was unclear, and I apologize because mine was submitted. I think Ann got it at 11 o'clock last night. I didn't know you wanted us to present. Do you want us to present these, or was this just to be submitted?
I really wanted us to present them, I guess, so that we can understand better what topics.
Because I had, I have 3 pages of what the committee has done or as recommended, but I didn't know that you wanted that all presented. I thought it was just to be submitted.
Well,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, you might remember the way this came up was as a result, and it was embedded in our discussion about possibly consolidating some committees. And this has been mentioned, a report out from committees, been mentioned several times by Commissioner Gossett, to only highlight what your accomplishments have been. And it dovetails into the bigger discussion. I have no problem moving or having that enrobed in the discussion continuing of the consolidation of the committees.
Well, what we might do, because it's getting a late hour, is defer on this topic, and I might even expand it to, besides your accomplishments, what are your ongoing topics and what are your future potential ones, and we can combine them all into one.
That'd be great and fine with me, because my intention at the next workshop on the bigger issue of potential consolidation is either to get a consensus to move that forward or to eliminate it. I have no problem, no skin in the game if the consensus is you don't want to go forward with it.
All right. So we're deferring on any discussion of the spreadsheet in there about coordinating dates. That'll be a future time. And with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is G, discuss award of contract for the replacement of well number 6. Evan?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to
Kevin?
turn it over to Kevin. Yeah.
And could I get the screen, please? Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Real briefly, kind of background on the scope again. Those are our wells out in that Breezewood Plantation, Warrenton Road area, 6 in the middle of Breezewood, 7 at the edge of Breezewood, 8, where we have our well 8 and our treatment facility out by the new traffic circle. The scope of this work is to move and construct a new well 6 on the property of our well 8 and our treatment complex there. We've had issues with well 6 over the past several years. It has not been used since 2021, I believe, due to an iron oxide problem. So we've been looking for another place. We did the testing. Did the test well out there this past year, and we're able to do that. We opened bids right before Thanksgiving. We had two bidders, Somerset Well Drilling and AC Schultes. And the low bidder was AC Schultes at $404,945. Our budget, as you can see, for this year was $650,000. That does include some of the permitting and the oversight, engineering oversight, but well within our budget allowance for the new well. So our requested board action will be at our next voting meeting to approve the award of the production well 6 relocation project to AC Schultes in the amount of $404,945.
Very good. Any questions among the commissioners?
Kevin, just one, if I may. What happens to the physical land site of well 6?
So our intent would be to decommission that once we have the new well in service, and then we would probably come back to see if we want to turn that land back over to Breezewood. As you know, we got that well from Breezewood when we took on their system, so I'm sure they would be very interested in getting that little piece of property back.
And the investigation to relocate it at Site 8, I guess environmentally have looked at that with the potential building around there and what have you for?
Yes, we did, especially because of the housing area, that first the hospital and then the housing area that's going in right next to it. So we actually did the test well this past year after the majority of that had already started. So they are not hooked to our system. They're fed by Tidewater. Our system runs down Warrington and then to like Breezewood and beyond.
And are there any other, in the general vicinity, any other wells for Tidewater or what have you that would hit the same aquifer?
Oh, a lot of them hit the same aquifer, but not that would impact on our ability to draw out of that aquifer.
And this would be an expansion of 8, or I mean, the capacity is equaled with this move?
I don't know the exact capacity of the new well. I think it was designed to replace the old 6, specifically the same capacity as 6, which was less than 8, but I can verify that for you.
We're not losing capacity or
No,
gaining capacity?
no, absolutely. At best, or at worst, we're keeping the same capacity.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Walter?
Walter Birmingham, 123 on Open Avenue. About a year ago, somewhere back, I just throw these things aside after a while, I asked about the new well, the test well that was put out by the new hospital, and nobody seemed to know anything about it. Be advised, if you don't know it, there is no Water and Sewer Committee for anybody else to know. These things are made, and I didn't see any bid notices like we had for the lifeguard facility or anything else, and like other communities put in. And again, I come back, so what did we spend for a test well? And I'd asked Evan at the time, and he said it was part of the comprehensive development plan. I didn't go looking for it in the monies, but what I was prepared to do before the comments that came out today was, did you know about it? If not, why not? How much did we pay for the test well? Who put it in? Last I saw, there was no banding around it, and I talked to the state about it. And you're talking, all due respect, Ms. Sharp, you're talking about one committee, and when there's no other committees doing this kind of work, there is no historical knowledge. And your idea of one committee, you might as well not have any of you, because the 3 of you, just like for the lifeguard facility, there is no check and balance. And all of you, just about all of you, are sitting there and are part of that problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
Mayor, if I could just clarify one thing. Walter had mentioned the comprehensive development plan. I think what he meant was the capital improvement plan. So you recall FY23, there was monies in the budget for the replacement investigation construction for that.
Right. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Any other comments? With that, Commissioner announcements and comments, are there any?
Yes, I have one, and I'm volunteering myself to work with the city manager, assistant city manager, on developing procedure or policy on gifts. You know, we've had this great opportunity today to hear from a fishing pier being gifted to the city. A lot of questions, what happens here, there, and everywhere. You know, I'm just going back and looking over things that come off the top of my mind. Garden of the Navigators, the fountain, the dock, the Temperance Fountain, the Moby Mats, the Verrazano Monument, the diorama, all of these items are gifts to the city. And that old phrase, you'll look a gift horse in the mouth. We really have no policy or procedure. It's all a one-off deal of what is this really going to produce for the good of the city. And these are all wonderful projects, and they bring great enjoyment to some people here in the city. But again, to set a standard or to set some policy or procedure so that those individuals willing to give to the city understand what are they committing to. And also, on the other side, what the city is committing to. All those ones I just mentioned are all maintenance issues that the city takes on and takes on and takes on. And again, I'm not saying that this is to prevent this at all. I think they're all enhancements to the city, but as we become more and more involved with more and more gifts or maintenance or what have you, we just need to know what we're getting into and what those individuals that are so wonderfully gifting things to the city, what their responsibilities are.
Well, you've already been tasked with that.
I know, but it just comes to my mind again.
Call it the donation policy or
Right.
something, but
It will happen here.
hopefully first of the year you'll be able to get
Not the
something.
first of the year, no. Budget time, first of the year.
Very good. With that, any other commissioner announcements, comments? No. Our future meeting dates, Monday, December 11th is a special meeting of the commissioners, and Friday, December 15th is our regular meeting. With that, is there any further citizen comment?
Charlie Arlo, 82 Sussex Street,
Yes,
Rehoboth
sir.
Beach. I just wanted to say that I'm thrilled that Commissioner Sharp is interested in enforcement. I was an enforcement attorney under the Federal Clean Air Act for 29 years, and we all said if you haven't got good enforcement, it's as if you had no rule or underlying policy altogether. Therefore, I would ask that you may want to confer with our counsel, our solicitor, to see if there's a better way of writing our rules and regulations, our code provisions, in a way that is enforcement friendly, so that there are not a lot of loopholes in it, and that it can maybe, well, under the Federal Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, there's a citizen suit enforcement provision, so that if Chief Banks doesn't have enough people on his staff or can't find enough people to hire, people like myself could bring a lawsuit, a complaint against those who violate our environmental provisions, for example. That's all.
Thank you. I have a citizen question. If you can do it in under 1 minute. The difference between a EV charger number 2 and number 3.
Yes, I can. I'd be glad to answer that for you.
1 minute.
1 minute? I can do it
Ready?
less than 1 minute.
Ready, go ahead.
Level 2 is 240 volts, the same as your dryer or your electric stove voltage, which is twice of what a wall socket is. And level 3 is twice of what a level 2 is, and it provides a lot more power faster and can charge up your battery in half an hour, 45 minutes if you're all the way at empty. I don't advise going all the way to empty. Try to get filled up before you get all the way to the empty so you don't have to push it the last 20 yards.
Good, 45 seconds. Good job, Charlie. Thank you very much. Anybody else? If not, then we adjourn this meeting at 12:40 p.m. Thank you very much.